Good morning, everyone. In the last class, we discussed about what is monolith architecture and microservices architecture. Monolith means developing all the functionalities in one single application. If you develop all the functionalities in one single application, then it is called as monolith application. With monolith application, we are having some advantages as well as some disadvantages. So this monolith is outdated architecture. Earlier, we used to develop the application by using monolith. Currently, we are developing the applications by using microservices architecture. So what is microservice architecture? If we develop, if we develop our requirements by using multiple services, then it is called as microservices architecture. So client is giving a project for e-commerce business. In the e-commerce business project, several functionalities will be available. Instead of developing all the functionalities in one application, we will develop multiple APIs, or we can say multiple services. Then that application is called as microservices application. With microservices based applications, we are having some advantages as well as some challenges. So when we compare advantages and challenges, advantages are more. When we compare, advantages are more. That's why in the market, microservices architecture is having more demand. Now guys, in the one single line, what is a microservice? In one single line, can you tell me what is a microservice? Come on guys, what is a microservice? Can anyone tell me in a single line, what is a microservice? Microservices means architectural design pattern to develop the applications. Microservices is an architectural pattern to develop applications. So instead of developing all the functionalities in single project, we are going to divide the functionalities into multiple services. Perfect. With this, we are clear with what is monolith architecture and what is microservices. So what is monolith and what is microservice? We are clear. Microservices architecture. Sir, how we are going to develop this microservices in the real time? What is the architecture we are going to follow for the microservices development? For microservices, there is no fixed architecture, guys. For Spring MVC, there is a fixed architecture. For JVM, there is a fixed architecture. But for microservices, there is no fixed architecture. People are using microservices architecture according to their requirement or according to their convenient. So for microservices is a design pattern to develop our applications. Microservices is a design pattern to develop applications. Okay. For microservices based application, there is no fixed architecture. There is no fixed architecture for microservices based applications. For microservices based applications, there is no fixed architecture. People are customizing microservices architecture microservices architecture according to their requirement. Okay, so there is no fixed architecture for microservices based application. People are customizing microservices architecture according to their requirement. Microservice nothing but a design pattern which is used to develop our applications. My project is having 100 requirements. Instead of developing all the 100 requirements in one project, we are going to develop microservices. Micro nothing but a small service. Functionality will be developed in multiple services. Instead of developing in one application, functionality will be developed in multiple services. That is called microservices based application. As it is a design pattern, people are using according to their convenience. There is no fixed architecture for microservices based applications. People are customizing this architecture according to their convenience. So let us see the generalized microservices architecture. Let us see generalized architecture of microservices. So whatever the architecture that I am explaining you, that is not final, that is not fixed. So most of the people will follow this kind of architecture, but there is no fixed architecture for microservices. People are going to customize the microservices architecture according to their requirement. So let us see generalized architecture of microservices. So when we are talking about microservices, the first thing that we need to talk about is service registry. In microservices, the very first thing that we need to understand is service registry. Service registry. Okay. The second one that we need to talk about is admin server. The second one that we need to talk about is admin server. And the third one that we need to talk about is Jipkin server. First one is service registry. Second one is admin server. Third one is Jipkin server. Jipkin server. And fourth one is services. Services nothing but the REST APIs. The REST APIs. And the next one is API gateway. The next one is API gateway. Before that, we will be having a concept called FIAN client. FIAN client. And the next one is API gateway. API gateway. These are the main key players. These are the main key players in the microservices architecture. So again, I'm saying, so there is no rule that we need to use all of these things in the microservices project. So it is a generalized architecture. Most of the people will use these concepts. Most of the people will use these concepts. So can you read this? What are the 6 topics available here? First one is service registry. Second one is admin server. Third one is Jipkin server. Fourth one, actual REST APIs. Fifth one is a FIAN client. Sixth one, API gateway. So like that, there are 6 components are available. Now we need to understand what is the purpose of these components. Can you guys read it once again? Service registry, admin server, Jipkin server, REST APIs, FIAN client, API gateway. Come on, guys. Are you able to read these 6 points now? Are you able to read these 6 points now? So you need to remember these 6 points because we are going to develop our microservices based application based on these 6 points only. One is service registry, second one is admin server, third one is Jipkin server, fourth one the REST APIs, fifth one is a FIAN client, sixth one is the API gateway. All right. So now what is the purpose of each one of these things and how we are going to use them? Service registry is used to register all our services available in the application. So we need to understand how many services are available, how many microservices are available in our application, what is the name of each service, what is the URL of each service, what is the status of each service. All the details will be maintained by our service registry. All the details will be maintained by our service registry. So service registry, nothing but a repository where all our services will be registered. All our services will be registered. That is called as service registry. We can use Joule proxy as a we can use Eureka as a service registry. So there is a concept called Eureka server. We can use Eureka server as a service registry. So what is the role of service registry? Service registry is used to maintain the list of services, services names, and services URLs. What all the services available in the project, those services names, those services URLs, those services current status will be maintained in the service registry. Then next one, there is a concept called admin server. There is a concept called admin server. Admin server is available, right? Admin server is available. So Spring Boot admin server. Admin server is used to monitor all your applications at one place with the user interface. Admin server is used to monitor all your applications at one place. Currently, we are using actuators. What is the purpose of actuators? Actuators are used to monitor our applications. But for every application, separate URL will be available. You need to send a separate request. You need to remember the URL of the each application to monitor. If you go for admin server, all your microservices, I mean to say all your APIs can be monitored from one place with the help of admin server. Admin server will provide an user interface. Admin server will provide an user interface to monitor all our applications at one place with a beautiful user interface. And the third one is Jipkin server. Jipkin server. This Jipkin server is used to trace our application execution details. Distributed log tracing we will understand by using Jipkin server. So which request received, the request processed by how many services, how much time taken by server to process the request, the execution details, the each request execution details we can monitor by using Jipkin server. So I'm going to take three servers here. One as service registry, We can also call it as Eureka server. Eureka server we will use as a service registry, and we will be using one admin server and Jipkin server. Admin server is used to monitor our application at one place. Our application nothing but collection of services, right? All the services I want to monitor at one place with user interface. For that, admin server will provide that user interface. The third one is Jipkin server. Jipkin server is used to monitor the request execution details of our application, which request came, how much time the server took, how much time each service has taken to process the request. Those details we can understand with the help of Jipkin server. Then after, our actual services comes into picture. Our actual services comes into picture. Those are called as our microservices. Those are called as our microservices, or we can say those are our actual REST APIs. Where our application business logic will be available, those are called as our microservices. So we can have one microservice, we can have 10 microservices, we can have 20 microservices in the project, we can have 30 microservices in the project. It is depending upon our project requirement. So let me call it as service one, nothing but one REST API, and this is service 2, service 1 and service 2. Like this we are going to develop multiple REST APIs. We are going to develop multiple REST APIs in our project. So there can be 10 services or there can be 30 services. So what is the meaning of services here? What is the meaning of services here? Services are nothing but the REST APIs that we are going to develop in our project. The REST API is nothing but the REST APIs we are going to develop in our project. So we may have 10 REST APIs, we may have 20 REST APIs, we may have 30 REST APIs. It depends upon our project requirement. These REST APIs are called as actual microservices. Now, so what are the microservices we are developing? These microservices will be registered with service registry. So our microservices will act as a clients for the service registry, and our microservices will act as a client for admin server, will act as a client for admin server, and will act as a client for Jipkin server also. Understand my point? What are the services we are going to develop? Our services will act as a clients for service registry. Service registry is one microservice which will maintain all the services details in the project. How many services available in the project? What is the name of the service? What is the URL of the service? What is the status of the service? All that information will be maintained by service registry. We are going to use Eureka as a service registry. Then admin server. In my project, multiple services will be available. Monitoring these services at one place is difficult. Remembering URL of the service is also difficult. That's why we are going to use admin server. Admin server is providing one user interface to monitor all the services at one place. Admin server is providing one user interface to monitor all the services at one place. Then what is Jipkin server? Jipkin server is used for tracing. So which request came to our application? How many services involved in the request processing? What is the execution time taken to process the request? That information we can observe from the Jipkin server. Then actual services. Services nothing but our REST APIs where the business logic will be available, like hotels booking, flights booking, trains booking, cabs booking, buses booking. The actual business logic of the application will be available in services. Those services are called as APIs, and some people will call them as microservices. That nothing but small functionality will be available. One project can have multiple services. One project can have multiple services. Are you able to understand? Are you able to understand? Are you guys able to understand? Now here, one service can communicate with another service. This is called as inter-service communication. One microservice, those two microservices are belongs to one project. There are two REST APIs in our project. One REST API want to communicate with the another REST API. One REST API want to communicate with another REST API. This is called as inter-service communication. In our project only, there are several services available, nothing but several REST APIs available. If one REST API want to communicate with another REST API, then we will use a concept called FIAN client. What is that concept, guys? We will use a concept called FIAN client. FIAN client is used for inter-service communication. In my project, there are several services available. I mean to say several APIs available. One API want to communicate with another API. Both the APIs belongs to same project. Both APIs belongs to same project. Then that communication is called as intercommunication. Microservices intercommunication. Microservices intercommunication. How to achieve microservices intercommunication? How to achieve microservices intercommunication, guys? Can you tell me? How to achieve microservices intercommunication? We will use a concept called FIAN client. We will use a concept called FIAN client. And sometimes our microservices will talk to external services also. Sometimes our microservices may talk to external services also. What is the meaning of external services? External services are nothing but third-party APIs. What is the meaning of external services? Third-party APIs. My microservice may talk to external service also based on the requirement. You know already how to access a REST API. You can access a REST API by sending a HTTP request, by using REST template, or by using web client. You can access that. By using REST template or by using web client, you can access third-party REST API. If you want to access inter-service, then we can go for FIAN client. What is the meaning of inter-service communication and third-party service communication, guys? Can you tell me the difference between inter-service communication and intra-service communication? Can you tell me the difference between inter-service communication and intra-service communication? Come on. Quick. What is the difference between inter-service communication and intra-service communication? Inter-service communication is nothing but communicating from one service to another service within the same application. That is called as inter-service communication. Then what is external service communication? Our services will talk to other company services. Our project will access third party project. Then that is called as external service communication. Inter-service communication and external service communication. So we will be doing both inter-service communication, external service communication as part of our microservices. Are you clear as of now? Service registry, admin server, Jipkin server, services, fee and client, inter-service communication, exter-service communication, inter-services communication and external service communications. Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with this architecture now? Shall I proceed further? Guys, this microservices is damn important. Next 10 days, whatever I'm going to explain, every concept will be asked in the interview. Whatever we are going to discuss for next 10 days from today, the next 10 days, every topic is important. Every topic is real time. Every topic will be asked in the interview. You got my class, you got the points, you got my point. Every concept that we are going to discuss for next 10 days is damn important. Every concept will be asked in the interview. Every concept will be asked in the interview. Service registry. It is used to register all the services of our application. Admin server. Admin server will provide a platform to monitor all your services at one place with a beautiful user interface. Jipkin server. Jipkin server is a tracing system where you can trace your application execution details. Services. Services nothing but our actual APIs which contains business logic. Our services will act as a client for service registry, will act as a client for admin server, will act as a client for Jipkin server. So our services will be acting as a clients for three services here: service registry, admin server, and Jipkin server. In our services, based on the requirement, we need to communicate from one service to another service within the project. If one service is communicating with another service within the project, then that is called inter-service communication. To achieve that inter-service communication, we are going to use fee and client. Fee and client is one concept that is used to establish connection between two services. Next one, based on the requirement, sometimes we need to talk to external APIs. External API is nothing but other company APIs we need to access within our application. For that, we can use either REST template or we can use web client to make a request. Perfect. Then, so we are going to have multiple services in our project. Are we going to write the security in all the services? Are we going to write the security in all the services? Or we need to have one main gate to secure our applications? Are we going to write the security in all the services? Or we will be using one main gate to secure our APIs? We will use one common point. We will use one entry point to manage all our services. That's where API gateway concept comes into picture. API gateway concept comes into picture. So what is the purpose of this API gateway? API gateway will act as a entry point for microservices based application. In our project, multiple microservices will be available. Those are called as APIs. Those are called as APIs. Now, API gateway will act as a mediator between the users and the backend APIs. Any request comes to our application should pass through API gateway. API gateway will act as a entry point for our microservices based application. Okay, anybody who want to access our application directly, they cannot access our APIs. Directly they cannot access our APIs. So the user request will come to API gateway. API gateway can validate the request, and API gateway will forward the request to service registry. API gateway will forward the request to service registry. So here our public users will be available. Public users will be sending requests to access our application. The user request will not go to the backend APIs directly. Okay, so this is my request one. Similarly, multiple requests will come to our application. API gateway will act as a front gate for all our APIs. API gateway will act as a front gate for all the APIs. API gateway is called as entry point for our microservices based application. Within the API gateway, we can write filters and routers. In the API gateway, we will write the filters plus routing. Filters is used to filter the request, whether we need to process this request or not, that we will decide by using filter. If request is valid, then only I want to process the request. If the request is not valid, then I want to stop the request. And which request should be processed by which API. So users are accessing our application. User is accessing which functionality. User want to access which functionality. So in the backend, there are several APIs available. Which request should go to which service in the backend? That routing also will be available in API gateway. API gateway will act as a front gate for all the APIs. It is the entry point for all the APIs. It is the entry point for all the APIs. In the API gateway, filters we can write and routing we are going to configure. Filters is used to perform pre-processing and post-processing of a request. Whether we need to process the request or not, we can evaluate that request by using a filter in the API gateway. If that validation got passed, then API gateway will use routing to understand which request should go to which API or which service. Service registry will maintain the details of the service. What is the name of the service? What is the URL of the service? That details will be maintained by service registry. Admin server will provide one user interface to monitor all the APIs at one place. Jipkin server will provide the details of all the services at one place, execution details, tracing details. Services will be available. Services can be 1, services can be 10, services can be 30. If one service is communicating with another service internally, then that is called inter-service communication. To achieve this inter-service communication, we will use VN client. Sometimes we may need to talk to external services also. For that, we can use REST template and web client. Are you guys clear? Beautiful diagram I have prepared now. So this is the architecture of microservices based project. This is the architecture of microservices based project. But is it a standard architecture? I have a question. Is it a standard microservices architecture? Is it a standard architecture that every company will follow? Is it a standard architecture that every company will follow to develop microservices based application? Or it is just one generalized architecture most of the people will follow? Yeah. So this is called as microservices architecture. Yeah, guys, please read this diagram. Take a screenshot also. Are you able to digest this diagram? Come on, guys, please respond. What is the use of third-party APIs? Third-party APIs means somebody developed some logic which you want to access, like payment gateways. You want to talk to banking application. Okay, then your service will talk to third-party service. Somebody developed, some company developed a project. You suppose, for example, now you want to retrieve a person data using Aadhaar card number. So Aadhaar card is a central government project. Your application wants to talk to Aadhaar card project. Then Aadhaar card project is a third party project for us, which is developed by other company. Our company will talk to Aadhaar card project. That is a third party API. Suppose I want to understand how much income tax paid by this employee in the last year based on the PAN card number. PAN card project is our project, or it is a third party project developed by other company. Mr. Anish Singh, I want to access income tax of a employee based on the PAN card. So PAN card project is our project, or PAN card is a third party project now. PAN card is a third party project now. So how you will access the PAN card project from your project? By using REST template or by using web client. That will be third party API. Anybody having any question? Please type in the chat box. I want to proceed further. Any question, anybody? Please type in the chat box. I will read out. What is the difference between Jipkin and SLF4J? SLF4J is a logging implementation, sir. Jipkin is a server where you can see the execution details of your request. So your request processed within how many seconds of time? Which service involved in processing your request? That data we can monitor by using Jipkin. SLF4J is a log implementation API. So there is no comparison between SLF4J and Jipkin. So Jipkin will provide you one user interface where you can see your application execution details, time taken to process the request by our application. Okay. What is the actual purpose of API gateway? API gateway is the entry point to receive the request for our backend APIs. So in the backend, there are several services are available. Can we give the services access to the public people directly? This is my service 1. This is my service 2. This is my service 3. Can we give the access for services to the public users directly? Simple example, you have a house. Will you allow the people to your house from every room? For every room, you will keep a gate for outside people, or only from main gate people should come into your house? For every room, you will have a gate where other people can come outside into your room, or only from the main gate people should come into your room? Only from the main gate. So API gateway is like a main gate for our house, which will decide who should come inside, who should not come inside. API gateway is like a main entry point for our house. API gateway is a main entry point for our house. Which request should come inside, which request should not come inside will be decided by API gateway. Okay. Yeah, Anish Singh got a job with 8 lakhs package. He sent a message now. Congratulations, Anish. I wish you all the best, man. Good. Yes, in the API gateway, in the API gateway, in the API gateway, we can use that authentication. In the API gateway, we can use that authentication concept. Okay, whether we need to process this request or not, that will be decided by API gateway. That will be decided by API gateway. Are you getting my point? Right. What is the purpose of admin server? Somebody is asking. What is the purpose of admin server? Somebody is asking. Can you guys tell me what is the purpose of admin server now? Guys, can you tell me what is the purpose of admin server? Come on. What is the purpose of our admin server? Admin server is used to monitor. I mean, it is used to access actuator endpoints of our application at one place, to monitor and manage all the services at one place. We will do that by using admin server. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all the backend services at one place. By using admin server, we can monitor and manage all the services at one place. Jipkin server is used to monitor request execution details. How many requests, which request taken, how much time, that can be monitored by using Jipkin server. You got the concept now? What is microservices architecture? Which concepts involved in the microservice architecture? And what is the purpose of that each concept? API gateway, service registry, admin server, Jipkin server, services, fee and client, inter-service communication, external service communication, inter-service communication, and external service communication. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point? All right. Now let us see this. Service registry. Service registry. Service registry is used to register all the services at one place. Service registry is used to register all our backend. All our backend services are APIs. Okay. Service registry will maintain. Service registry will maintain. Service registry will maintain services, names, URLs, and status of each service. Okay, we can use Eureka server as a service registry. We can use Eureka server as a service registry. Can you read these points now? Service registry is used to register all our backend services or APIs. Service registry will maintain services names, URLs, and status of each service. We can use Eureka server as a service registry. We can use Eureka server as a service registry. Admin server is used to monitor and manage. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend services at one place. Admin server will provide user interface. Admin server will provide user interface to monitor and manage our services. Using admin server user interface, we can access actuator endpoints of our services at one place. So our project is having multiple services. So for these projects monitoring purpose, we will use actuators. So how can I access the actuators of all these services at one place? That's where admin server comes into picture. Can you read it now? What is admin server? Can you read it now? What is admin server? Admin server is used to monitor and manage. Admin server is used to monitor and manage. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend services at one place. Admin server will provide user interface to monitor and manage our services. Okay. Whatever the user interface is giving by admin server, we can access actuator endpoints of our services at one place. Jipkin server is used for distributed log tracing. 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 Using Jipkin server will provide user interface. Jipkin server will provide user interface to monitor application execution details. Now, my application is executing. In my application, there are several REST APIs available. One request is processed by how many REST APIs? One request processed by how many REST APIs? And how much time it took to process that request? Which REST API took more time? Which REST API took more time to process the request? Because whenever you send a request, multiple REST APIs involved in processing one request. Your request came to service 1 talking to service 2 talking to service 3 talking to service 4. In the 4 services, which service took more time to process our request? Which service took more time to process our request? That we can understand by using Jipkin server. Jipkin server is used for distributed log tracing. Jipkin server will provide user interface to monitor application execution details. Which service took more time to process our request? How many services involved? How many services involved? And which service took more time? Which service took more time to process the request? Can be monitored using Jipkin. Jipkin is used for distributed log tracing. Jipkin server will provide user interface to monitor application execution details. How many services involved and which service took more time to process the request can be monitored using Jipkin. Can be monitored using Jipkin. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point? What is service registry? What is admin server? And what is Jipkin server? Are you clear with my point now? Can you please read it? Can you please read it? What is a service registry? What is admin server? What is a Jipkin server? Can you please read it? You understood what is service registry? What is admin server? What is Jipkin server now? Got it? Yes. Next one, backend services are nothing but the REST APIs. Backend services are nothing but REST APIs, which are also called as microservices, which are also called as microservices. Backend services are nothing but REST APIs, which are also called as microservices. Backend REST APIs contains actual business logic. Backend REST APIs contains actual business logic of our application. Backend REST APIs contains actual business logic of our application. Okay. One project can have multiple REST APIs in the backend. One project will have multiple REST APIs in the backend. One project will have multiple REST APIs in the backend. Okay. Our backend APIs will act as a clients for our backend APIs will act as client for service registry, for admin server, for Jipkin server. See here, backend APIs will act as a clients for it will register with backend API will act as a client for service registry. Backend API will act as a client for admin server. Backend API will act as a client for Jipkin server. You understand my point? Backend API will act as a client for service registry, will act as a client for admin server, will act as a client for Jipkin server. Backend APIs will act as clients for each backend API. Each backend API will act as client for service registry, for acting as a client for service registry plus admin server plus Jipkin server. Each backend API will act as a client for service registry, client for admin server, and client for Jipkin server. Each backend API will act as client for service registry, admin server, and Jipkin server. Each backend API will act as a client for service registry, admin server, and Jipkin server also. Okay. If one backend API communicated with another backend API within the project, then that is called inter-service communication. If one backend API communicating with another backend API within the same application, within the same application, if one backend API communicating with another backend API, then it is called as what, guys? If one backend API is communicating with another backend API, then it is called as what concept? Inter-service communication or external service communication. Within the same application, if one backend API is communicating with another backend API, then it is called as what concept? It is called as inter-service communication. It is called as inter-service communication. FIAN client will be used to perform inter-service communication. FIAN client will be used to perform inter-service communication. Which concept we are using to achieve inter-service communication? Which concept we are using to achieve inter-service communication, guys? FIAN client. FIAN client. Okay. Right. Note. Our backend APIs can talk to third-party APIs also using HTTP request. Based on a requirement, our backend APIs can communicate with third party APIs. Based on the requirement, our backend APIs can communicate with third party APIs using HTTP request, using REST template or web client, using REST template or web client. Third party APIs we are going to access by using REST template and by using web client. By using REST template and by using web client. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point now? So you got the clarity? What is inter-service communication and what is external service communication? When we will use a FIAN client, when we will use REST template or web client, FIAN client will be used to achieve inter-service communication. So within the application, if one service wants to communicate with the another service, then we will go for FIAN client. If our service want to talk to third party REST API, then we will go for external service communication by using REST template or by using web client. Okay. API gateway will act as an entry point for our backend APIs. API gateway will act as entry point for backend APIs. It acts as a mediator between end users and backend APIs. Okay. API gateway will act as an entry point for our backend APIs. People should not access our backend APIs directly. Every request which is coming to our application should go through API gateway. API gateway will act as an entry point for our backend APIs. In the backend, how many APIs can be available, guys? For a project, how many APIs can be available? For a project, how many APIs can be available? Only one API will be available. Several APIs can be available. For one application, how many APIs will be available? Only one API will be available, or several APIs can be available? Several APIs can be available. Several APIs can be available for one project. Are we going to allow users to access our backend APIs directly? Can we allow the users to access our backend APIs directly? Is it recommended way? Is it recommended way to allow the people to access our backend APIs directly? No. Are you going to allow the outside people into your bedroom directly? There will be a gate for your bedroom from your home to the outside people. So outside people can directly come into your bedroom. Will you do that in your house? Can you keep a open door for your bedroom so that outside people can come into your house directly? No. Then how outside people should come into your house? How the outside people should come into your house? Directly they can come into your bedroom, or they should come from main gate? Come on, guys. They should come from the main gate. Okay. So now, can I say API gateway will act as a main gate for our backend APIs in the project? Can I say API gateway will act as a main gate for our backend APIs. API gateway will sit between the user interface, the end users and our backend APIs. समझा? समझा? All right. What logic will be there in the API gateway? API gateway contains filters and routing. API gateway contains filters and routing. What is the purpose of filter? Filters we can use to authenticate the request. Filters we can use to authenticate incoming requests. Filters we can use to authenticate incoming requests. Routing is used to decide which request should go to which API, which backend API. Routing will decide which request should go to which backend API. Routing will decide which request should go to which backend API. Spring provided cloud gateway. Earlier, we used to work with Joule proxy. Earlier we used to work with a Joule proxy for API gateway, but now it got removed from latest version of boot. Spring Cloud Gateway we can use. Spring Cloud Gateway we can use as API gateway for our application. Which concept we are going to use? Which concept we are going to use to work with API gateway? In the previous versions of the Spring, we have Joule proxy. In previous versions, we have Joule proxy as API gateway. In the previous versions of Spring Cloud, Spring Boot, in previous versions, we have Joule proxy as API gateway, but now it got removed from latest version of boot. Currently, Spring Cloud Gateway is available. Spring Cloud Gateway we can use as API gateway for our application. Spring Cloud Gateway we can use as API gateway for our application. Understood my point? Now you got the full clarity diagrammatically and theoretically what is microservices architecture. Microservices is a design pattern to develop applications. I can say microservices is an architectural design pattern. Microservices is an architectural design pattern to develop our applications. Earlier, people used to develop the applications by using monolith architecture. Earlier, people used to develop the applications by using monolith architecture. Nowadays, people are developing the applications by using microservices architecture. Microservices is an architectural design pattern to develop our applications. There is no fixed architecture for microservices based applications. People are customizing microservices architecture according to their requirement. Sir, what is the meaning of customizing? Some people may not use admin server in the project. Some people may not use Jipkin server in the project. Some people may not use FIAN client in the project. Some people may not use service registry. Some people may not use API gateway. Are you getting my point? So everybody will use every concept which I mentioned in the diagram in the project in the real time. Will every microservices project will use every concept which we discussed in the diagram? Is it mandatory? Is it mandatory that everybody should use every concept which I mentioned in the diagram? Or it is optional for them? Is it mandatory or it is optional for them? Guys, come on. Is it mandatory or is it optional for them to use all the concepts which I have mentioned here? Optional. All the concepts are optional. All the concepts are optional. Okay. Some people only they will develop the services in the back end. That's it. They may not use admin server. They will not use Zipkin. They will not use service registry. They will not use API gateway. If I just develop 10 REST APIs for my requirement, that also called as microservices application. Are you getting my point? Now, I got a requirement from the client to develop a project. Then what I will do, I will develop only backend APIs, no Zipkin server, no admin server, no service registry, no API gateway. Directly I developed my REST APIs, 10 REST APIs I developed for the given requirement. So 10 REST APIs are available. That is also called as a microservices based application. Instead of developing all the functionalities in one project, I developed in several REST APIs. I mean to say 10 REST APIs I have used. That can be called as microservices based project. So for the microservices, do we have any fixed architecture? We don't have any fixed architecture for the microservices now. Do we have fixed architecture for the microservices, or we don't have fixed architecture for the microservices now? Do we have fixed architecture for the microservices, or we don't have any fixed architecture for the microservices? We don't have any fixed architecture for the microservices. So people are customizing microservices architecture according to their requirement. According to their requirement. So is this concept clear? Microservices is an architectural design pattern to develop our applications. There is no fixed architecture for microservices based applications. People are customizing microservices architecture according to their requirement. So in the microservices architecture, I'm showing you generalized microservices architecture. So what is generalized microservices architecture? Service registry, admin server, Zipkin server, backend REST APIs, FIN client, and API gateway. Service registry, admin server, Zipkin server, REST APIs, FIN client, API gateway. Service registry is used to register all our backend services at one place. It will maintain names of the services, URLs of the services, and status of the service. So which one we can use as Eureka server? Which one we can as Eureka server? Sorry, which one we can use a service registry? Eureka. Eureka server provided by Spring Cloud Netflix library. So from now we are going to use Spring Cloud concept. Okay, Spring Cloud libraries we are going to use to work with our microservices. We need one service registry for our project. So which one we are going to use as a service registry? Eureka server. Who provided this Eureka server for us? Eureka server provided by Spring Cloud Netflix library. Eureka server provided by whom? Eureka server provided by whom, guys? Is it part of the Spring Boot? Is it part of the Spring? Eureka server is part of the Spring MVC, or part of the Spring Boot? It is part of Spring Cloud. Eureka server provided by whom? Eureka server provided by Spring Cloud Netflix library. Okay. Now, admin server. Are you clear with service registry now? Theoretically, we will do practicals also, guys. Whatever you are able to see in the diagram, everything we will develop practically as one mini project today itself. Okay. Whatever the theory I explained, everything I will prove with one application. Okay. Right. Are you clear with what is the service registry? What is the purpose of service registry? What is service registry and what is the purpose of service registry? Are you clear? Are you clear? Yes. Yes. Service registry is used to register all the backend services at one place. Which one we are going to use as a service registry in our project? Which one we are going to use as a service registry in our project? Eureka server. Who provided Eureka server? Spring Cloud Netflix library. Who provided this? Spring Cloud Netflix library. Very good. Next, what is admin server? What is admin server? Can you guys respond? Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend services at one place. Admin server is used to monitor and manage all our backend services at one place. Now, to monitor and manage our REST APIs, we have actuators. Actuators will be available, but how you will monitor the actuators of all the services at a time? Difficult, right? You need to remember the URLs of each service. That's why we will use admin server. What is the benefit of going for admin server? Admin server will provide one user interface where you can monitor and manage all the backend APIs at one place. Admin server provided by code-centric company. It is not from the Spring Boot directly, guys. Admin server and admin client. Admin server and admin client provided by code-centric. So this is a third-party company provided by code-centric company. Spring Boot will use this. We can integrate with Boot. We can integrate with our Boot. It is a code-centric project. It is not from the Spring directly. Admin server, admin client provided by code-centric company. We can integrate with the Spring Boot application. Okay. Cloud configuration server is different. Admin server is different. I did not talk about cloud configuration server. Leave it. We will come to that in the coming classes. So currently I'm talking about only admin server. Currently I'm talking about only admin server. Admin server will provide user interface to monitor your services. So admin server provided by our Spring Boot or admin server is a third-party project. Admin server is provided by Spring Boot or it is a third party. It is a third party open source project. We can integrate with the Spring Boot. Okay. Now Zipkin. Zipkin server is used for which purpose, guys? Zipkin server is used for which purpose now? Zipkin server is used for distributed log tracing. Zipkin server is used for what purpose, guys? Zipkin server is used for distributed log tracing. So what does Zipkin server do? Zipkin server will provide user interface to monitor application execution details. How many services involved and which service took more time to process the request can be monitored using Zipkin. Zipkin is also third-party server. Zipkin is third-party open source server. open source server can be integrated with Spring Boot. Can be integrated with Spring Boot. Zipkin is third-party open source server, can be integrated with Spring Boot. We need to download manually Zipkin server, guys. Okay. Then backend services are nothing but our REST APIs, actual microservices. These are the backend APIs we are going to develop. So what is the purpose of these backend APIs, guys? Can you tell me? Can you tell me what is the purpose of these backend APIs? Backend APIs contains our actual business logic. Backend services are nothing but our REST APIs, which contains our actual business logic. Our backend API will act as a client for service registry, will act as a client for admin server, will act as a client for Zipkin server. Okay. Now, within the same application, if one backend API communicating with another backend API, then it is called as inter-service communication. How we will achieve inter-service communication? By using fee and client. Based on the requirement, can our APIs, can our services communicate with the third-party APIs also? Depends on the requirement. Our services can communicate with the third-party services also. So how you can access one REST API from another REST API? How you will access one REST API from the another REST API? You can use a REST template or FIAN client or web client, anything. You can use REST template, you can use web client, or you can use FIAN client also. Up to you, whatever you want. Next one, what is API gateway finally? What is API gateway, guys? What is API gateway? API gateway will act as entry point for all our backend APIs. API gateway will act as an entry point for all our APIs. API gateway will act as a mediator between end users and backend APIs. API gateway contains filters and routing. Filters we can use to authenticate our incoming requests. Routing will be used to decide which request should go to which backend API. In the previous versions, which one we used as API gateway? In previous versions, which one we used as API gateway? Joule proxy. In the current versions in the Spring Boot, in the latest versions of the Spring Boot, do we have Joule proxy or Joule proxy got removed? Do we have Joule proxy in the latest versions of the Spring Boot or Joule proxy got removed from the latest versions of the Spring Boot? Joule proxy got removed. Okay, guys. Now, which one we are using as a API gateway now? Which one is used? We are going to use as a API gateway now? Spring Cloud Gateway. Spring Cloud Gateway is a Netflix library given by Spring Cloud. So theoretically, are you clear with microservices architecture? Theoretically, are you clear with microservices architecture? Okay, guys. Now we need to develop one mini project on this microservices architecture. We need to develop one mini project on this microservices architecture. Then we will get the full clarity. Then we will get the full clarity. Okay, let us take 10 minutes break. Let us take 10 minutes break. Then we will start the development of our mini project using microservices. So you people can have some tea, coffee, and you can come back. So don't miss the session. Now the live implementation will be done. Live coding I will do for this microservices project implementation. Another 1 hour to 1.5 hour it is going to take. After the break, it is going to take another 1 hour to 1.5 hour to implement this microservices mini project. Once this mini project is completed, then you can keep happily microservices in your resume. Okay, guys. So today is Sunday. So if you have any other plans, please cancel for next 1 hour. The next 1 hour is very important. We are going to do the live implementation of microservices project. Okay, guys. Yep. Thank you. Let's take a break for 10 minutes and come back. Welcome back, guys. So in the previous session, we discussed about what is monolith architecture, what is microservices architecture, and we discussed about this microservices architecture also. What is service registry? What is admin server? What is a Jipkin server? What are the backend APIs? What is inter-service communication? What is fee and client? What is third-party API communication? What is API gateway? All these details we discussed in the previous session. Now, by using all these topics, we are going to develop one mini project. That is microservices based mini project I am going to develop. Observe carefully. Microservices mini project implementation. Microservices mini project implementation. Okay, right. So first I'm going to create service registry project. Okay, first step, create service registry using Eureka server. Create service registry using Eureka server. So as we discussed already, Eureka server provided by Spring Cloud Netflix library. Create service registry using Eureka server. So this is step 1, guys. This is my step 1. I will be creating service registry using Eureka server. Okay. Now, in order to create this Eureka server, I will be using Spring Cloud Starter Netflix Eureka server dependency. So which dependency I'm going to use? Spring Cloud Netflix Eureka server dependency I will be using. Step 1, I'm going to create Eureka server. Okay. So in the Eureka, to create the Eureka server, what we will use? Spring Cloud Netflix Eureka server dependency. Okay, Netflix Eureka server dependency. Add Spring Cloud Netflix Eureka server dependency. Then next one, configure enable Eureka server annotation at boot start class. Configure enable Eureka server annotation at the boot start class to represent that this is the Eureka server project. Configure server port as 8761. Configure server port as 8761 in application.yml file. Okay. Stop the self-service registry. Configure server port as 8761 in application.yml file. And we can configure, I can say that configure below properties. Configure below properties in application.yml file. What are the properties I'm going to configure in the application properties file? Server.port, I'm going to configure 8761. Sir, why only 8761? Can I use any other port number? Yes, you can use any other port number also. But what is the reason of using this service registry with 8761 port only? If you use the port number as 8761, then our backend services can auto register with the Eureka server. You no need to register the clients with the Eureka server manually. Client will search for Eureka server with the default port number as 8761. So if you don't use the port number as 8761 for Eureka, then manually you need to register your clients with the Eureka server. Are you clear with my point? Are you clear with my point? Why I am using 8761 as a default port? If I use the port number for the service registry as 8761, clients can auto register with the Eureka server. If your port number is different, then you need to register clients manually with the Eureka server. Okay. And the next point here, I'm going to specify Eureka dot client, Eureka dot client, then register with Eureka. Register with Eureka. I will specify as false. That means I am creating one application, service registry. This application is acting as a Eureka server. This application should register with the Eureka, or this application is acting as Eureka. This application should register with Eureka, or this application is acting as Eureka. Come on, guys. This application is acting as Eureka. This application is acting as Eureka, or this application should register with Eureka. This application is acting as Eureka. So that is the reason I'm telling Eureka client register with Eureka as a false. That means this application should not register with the Eureka. This application should not register with the Eureka. So we need to create one service registry project. Which server we are going to use as a service registry? Eureka server we are using as service registry. How to represent this project as a service registry? By using Netflix Eureka server dependency. This dependency we need to add in the pom.xml. So to represent this class as a Eureka server project, we need to use this annotation. Then we need to configure these properties in the YML. Port number 8761, register with Eureka false. That means this application should run on the port number 8761, and this application should not register with the Eureka. Run the application and access Eureka server in the browser. Run the application and access in browser. Okay, what will be the URL to access now? http://localhost:8761. I'm running on the port number 8761. Is this clear? Is this clear? 8761. Okay, chalo. Let us do the first project creation. Guys, observe carefully. So today I will share this document. You should complete this project. Whatever I am doing the project in the class today, you should complete this before coming to tomorrow. This is a mini project. I have planned this project on Sunday. Luckily, we got this session on Sunday, so that theory and practical both we will complete in the same day, so that you will not forget anything. Luckily, we got this session on Sunday, so theory and practical, both we are completing today. So after completion of this class, I will share this document. Everything is available step by step. I am writing the notes, live notes I am preparing, live coding I am doing, and I'm giving the explanation also. What else you need? You need to develop this project before coming to tomorrow's session. All right. File, new, starter project. Now I want to create one application. 44. Now let me create this finally in our application, which code we are using? SBMS. What is our course name? What is our course name, guys? You joined for which course? If you see, we developed almost 43 applications as of now. Car application, boot application, JPA application, WebMVC application, JSON, XML, REST applications. But finally, today, which application we are developing? Today, which application we are developing? SBMS application we are developing. We are in the last stages of our course. We are in the last stage of our course. We completed core module. We completed Spring Boot. We completed data JPA. We completed WebMVC. We completed RESTful services. Finally, we are in the microservices development now. Chalo. Spring starter project. So I'm going to give the name as 44 SBMS service registry. 44 SBMS service registry. This is the first microservice project we are preparing. Click on next. Spring web dependency and DevTools dependency, and I'm using Eureka server. Eureka server. Eureka discovery client available. Eureka server is available. So currently I am building service registry. Service registry means it is a Eureka server. So I have selected 3 dependencies, guys. Web dependency, Eureka server dependency, and DevTools dependency. Click on next, click on finish. So with this, our project is getting created. Our project is getting created. In this project, I am using service registry. In this project, I'm using my service registry. So let me close the remaining projects. Guys, see here, right click on this project to close unrelated projects. All the previous projects I'm closing, only this project will be open in my IDE. So service registry project created, go to pom.xml. Go to pom.xml. Can you see the Netflix Eureka server dependency added? Spring Cloud Starter Netflix Eureka server dependency got added. Spring Cloud Starter Netflix Eureka server dependency got added. Okay, guys, perfect. Now go to start class of this project. Represent this project is Eureka server. How to represent this project as Eureka server? By using one annotation called enable Eureka server. Let's represent this project as a Eureka server by using one annotation called enable Eureka server. This application I want to represent as Eureka server. By default, application.properties file is available. Do you know how to change this properties file to YML? Convert .properties to .yml. I converted the .properties to .yml. What is the port number we are going to use? What is the default port for Eureka? 8761. Can I use any other port also? Yes. What is the advantage if you go with 8761? What is the advantage of going with 8761? Clients can auto register. Clients can auto register. Okay. This application is acting as a Eureka. Do I need to register this application again with Eureka server? Not required. So what I need to do? Eureka dot client dot register with Eureka false. Register with Eureka false. Two properties I have written. Server port I have configured. Eureka client register with Eureka false I have given. Okay guys, fine, perfect. Let's update this project now. Maven, update the project. So with this our Eureka server is ready. With this our service registry is ready. So just I have completed 3 steps guys. I create Spring Starter project with below dependencies. Okay, create Spring Starter project with below dependencies. Create Spring Boot app with below dependencies. Okay, so what are the dependencies I have used? One is Netflix Eureka server, Spring Cloud Starter, Netflix Eureka server. Second one I used Web Starter. Third one I used DevTools. Okay, I created one project with these 3 dependencies. I configured this annotation at the start class. I configured these properties in the YML file. We are good with this. Let us run our application now. Run as boot app. I'm running my application, which is having port number 8761. Which is having the port number 8761. It is getting started, guys. Let's wait. It is getting started. Let's wait. Application is getting started. Yep. Application started. Application started. Go to the console. Can you see that? Localhost Eureka 8761. This is the URL where our application running. Guys, here 2 things are there. Embedded Tomcat is running. In that, Eureka is also available. Are you getting my point? I'm running my application. Spring Boot will give embedded container. Okay. Embedded container. Somebody is asking, please explain this property. I already explained, man. I already explained. Where are you listening? Are you chatting with your friends in the mobile? I already explained 3 times. What is this property? Again, you are asking, explain this. Please focus on the class. Don't do any chatting in the mobile. Wake up from your bed, join from laptop and concentrate. How many times I need to repeat? Already I am doing a repeat. I have that bad habit. I will do repeat for more than 3-4 times. Again, you are asking repeat. Please focus. This property is used to tell this application, this 44 application should not register with Eureka. This 44 application contains Eureka. This 44 application should not register with Eureka. That is the meaning of this property. Understood, all of you? All of you understood how I created my Eureka server project? Yes, Eureka server is running on what port number? Eureka server is running on what port number? 8761. Localhost colon 8761. Oh, I got one UI. Did we develop this page? Did we develop this page, guys? Who provided this page for us now? Who provided this page for us now? Did I develop this page anywhere in these steps? Anywhere in these steps, did I develop any UI page? Did I develop any UI page here? No. Then what happened? When you add Netflix Eureka, it will give the UI for you. This is the UI of our Eureka server. In this Eureka server, currently any instances registered? Instances currently registered with Eureka. Do we have any instances which are currently registered with Eureka? Do we have any instances which are currently registered with Eureka? Currently, there are no instances which are registered with the Eureka. Currently, there are no instances which are registered with the Eureka. Are you clear? Are you clear? Yes. Okay, with this, my first step got completed. So in this diagram, can I say my first step is completed? Are we able to build Eureka server? Are we able to build Eureka server? Instances means our services which we are going to develop, backend APIs. Currently, no service is registered with Eureka, no clients available for Eureka. Just my Eureka server started on the port number 8761. No instances are available with the Eureka currently. No services are available with the Eureka currently. First step completed. Service registry. Create service registry application using Eureka server. My first step got completed. Okay. Steps are also very simple. Create a project with Eureka server dependency. Add this annotation. Configure these properties. Run the application. 8761 is the port number. Now let us go to step 2. Let us go to step 2. Create Spring Boot application with admin server. Create Spring Boot application with admin server. So what is the purpose of admin server? What is the purpose of admin server? It is used to monitor and manage our services actuator endpoints. So admin server also will provide one interface, one UI to monitor and manage our backend services. So how to create one admin service project now? How to create one admin service project? Okay, see here. Create boot application with below dependencies. Create boot application with below dependencies. What are those dependencies? Web starter. I will be using web starter. I will be using dev tools. I will be using admin server. Admin server is from Spring Boot or it is from code centric. Admin server is from Spring Boot or it is from code centric. It is from code centric. Okay. Then how to represent this project is the admin server project. Configure enable admin server annotation. Configure enable admin server annotation at boot start class so that it will be represented as admin server. Okay. Configure port number. Configure embedded container port number. You can use any number, guys. There is no restriction. There is no default. You can use any port number. Sorry, guys. कोई गाली दे रहा है क्या? संडे पे क्लास ले रहा बोल के भाई, कोई गाली दे रहा है क्या? संडे भी नहीं छोड़ रहा है. एनीबॉडी स्कोल्डिंग? क्या है आशु, संडे भी नहीं छोड़ते भाई, बोल गाली दे रहा है क्या? This is for your career, man. This is not for me. This is for you. The most advanced technology you are learning, microservices, Spring Boot. You need to feel grateful you joined Spring Boot microservices with me. Complete real time. Very good, interesting subject, and I will make it more interesting for you. Don't scold me for taking your Sundays. Sunday is not only for you, for me also, but I'm sacrificing for your career. So if you learn this quickly, so that you can attend the interviews quickly, you can get the job quickly. समझा? Right. Don't scold me. ठीक है? Yeah. Configure embedded container port number. Right. I'm trying to create boot application admin server. As I discussed already, admin server is used to monitor and manage our applications at one place. Admin server is not from the Spring Boot guys. It is given by code centric. It is given by code centric. So how to create admin server? We are going to create a boot application. We are adding one dependency that is called admin server dependency. Then how to represent this project as an admin server? For that we will use enable admin server annotation. Configure embedded container port number. Any port number you can use it. There is no restriction. Any port number. Configure embedded container port number. You can use anything. We can use any port. Okay. Once it is done, run the application and access the URL in the browser. Run the application and access the application in browser. Okay. Right. URL http:// whatever the port you configure, with that port you are going to access this application. Are these steps clear? How to develop a admin server project now? Are these steps clear? Chalo, let's do this now. Service registry is done. Let's create admin server project. File, new, starter project. 45 Spring Boot microservice admin server. Okay, good. Click on next. Dev tools, web dependency. Let's search for admin. See here, admin server is from the Spring Boot or it is from code centric? Is it from Spring Boot? Is it from code centric? Admin server is from the code centric. So I have selected what you can search directly. Admin. You are getting code centric Spring Boot admin server. Code centric admin server. Click on next, click on finish. That's it. Yep. This project is also getting created. This is our 45 application, number 45. Number 45. Okay. Go to this, go to pom.xml. Can you see? Where is that admin server wala? Yes. Group ID for all the dependencies, the group ID is a Spring Boot. But only for this admin server, group ID is de.codecentric. That is the project where they developed admin server. It is from code centric. Spring Boot is integrated with that code centric. Okay, right. Perfect. Now let us go here and configure that enable admin server project. Enable admin server. Now port number. I will configure port number in the YML. Can we use any port number? Is there any restriction? No. Let me use 1111. Let me use 1111. Anything is fine. Maven update project. Force update. Admin server project I have created with these simple steps, and I am configuring the port number and I am trying to run this project. Okay, now let me check it. Admin server started. Now let me start the admin server, run as boot app. I'm running my admin server. I configure the port number as 1111. Application started. Running on the port number 11. You see here by default actuator is added. I did not added any actuator. By default it is coming. Let's go to the browser and access admin server localhost colon 1111. Oh, I got some UI. Did we develop this UI? Guys, did we develop this UI for Spring Boot admin? It is provided by admin server. Did we develop this UI or we got this UI from the admin server? We got from the admin server. So now how many servers are ready? How many servers are ready now? How many servers are ready now? Eureka is ready. Admin server is also ready. Any clients available for Eureka? Any instances registered with Eureka? No. Any applications or any instances registered with admin server? No applications registered with the admin server. No instances registered with the Eureka. Are you clear? Are you clear with these two steps now? Step 1, creating Eureka server project. Step 2, create admin server project. Now let's go for step 3. Let's go for step 3. Download and run Zipkin server. Zipkin server is available as a jar file. You can download the Zipkin jar and you can download Zipkin jar from below URL. You can download the Zipkin server from the internet directly. Download Zipkin server jar. Okay. Zipkin.io website is available here. If you click on this latest release, okay, it is going to give you this Zipkin jar. Now, when I click on this option, you see Zipkin server jar file getting downloaded. Can you try this URL now? If you click on that URL, Zipkin jar file will be downloaded. Is it downloading for you? Is it downloading for you? Yes. Once the Zipkin jar file is downloaded, run the jar file using below command. Run the Zipkin server jar file using below command. So what is the command we will use? Java space -jar space Zipkin server jar. Zipkin server jar. You just need to download the Zipkin server URL from this location. Once you have downloaded that URL, you just run that Zipkin server using this command. Okay, so now I have downloaded. My Zipkin server jar is available here. My Zipkin server jar is available here. Let me copy this jar. Go to our folder 19 SBMS. I will keep here. You see, Zipkin server jar is available here. Let me open CMD Java space -jar space Zipkin jar file. I'm running this jar file. I'm running this jar file. Now see, banner is printing. Zipkin banner is printing. Zipkin server is getting started. What is the port number? In which port number Zipkin is running? On which port number Zipkin is running, guys? On which port number Zipkin is running? 9411. Can we change that port number? It is already part of the jar. Okay, now let's go here and access it. localhost colon 9411. Am I able to access Jipkin UI? Did we develop this UI? Did we develop this UI? No, no, we did not develop this UI. It is used to just trace the logs. Distributed log tracing we can achieve by using Jipkin. Distributed log tracing we will achieve by using Jipkin. समझे? Are you clear? So with this, how many servers are ready? How many servers are ready? 3 servers are ready. Eureka server running on the port number 8761. What is the port here? 8761 is the port of my Eureka server. Eureka port is 8761. Admin server port is 1111. Jipkin server port 9411. Understood? My service registry, I mean to say my Eureka server running on the port number 8761. Service registry application Eureka server running on the port number 8761. Admin server running on the port number 1111. Jipkin server running on the port number 9411. With this, 3 servers are ready. Now what is the next step now? What is the next step now? Come on guys, what is the next step now? REST APIs we have to develop. Actual REST APIs, actual microservices we have to develop now. Okay, are you comfortable with all these 3 steps? Can you do this on your own by using this document? Creating Eureka server, creating admin server, and running the Jipkin server. Running the Jipkin server. I hope you are comfortable. So Eureka server, I'm able to access in the browser. UI is available. Admin server, I'm able to access. UI is available. Jipkin server, I'm able to access. UI is available. Okay, good. Let's go and start our actual REST API development. So that is our step 4. That is our actual step 4. Develop REST API. Let me call it as welcome API. Develop REST API. Let me call it as welcome API. Okay. Now this REST API will act as a client for how many servers? I'm going to create one REST API now. This REST API will act as a client for how many servers? Can you tell me? This REST API will act as a client for how many servers now? Come on guys, tell me. 3. It will act as a client for service registry. It will act as a client for admin server. It will act as a client for Jipkin server. I need to develop one REST API and that is going to act as a client for service registry, admin server, Jipkin server. Chalo, let's do that. Create boot application. Create boot application with below dependencies. Observe carefully guys. This is most important step now. Create boot application with below dependencies. What dependencies? First one, I want to make this application as Eureka Discovery Client. I want to make this application as Eureka Client. And I want to make this application as admin client. And I want to make this application as Jipkin client. So I want to create a REST API. That REST API will act as a client for Eureka server, client for admin server, client for Jipkin server. So I'm going to use all these 3 dependencies. So whatever the REST API I'm going to develop now, that REST API will act as a client for Eureka, will act as a client for admin, will act as a client for Jipkin. Samjhe? Next, I'm going to use one more dependency called Slate. Okay, Slate is the dependency which will help Jipkin to trace application details. Slate, it is for logging. It is for logging purpose. Slate dependency, Slate Jipkin combination we are going to use to trace distributed logs. Okay, next one, web starter, then dev tools. Web starter and dev tools. Then finally, actuator. Actuator. Why actuator? Actuator is used to monitor and manage our application. Where I am going to monitor our application now? In the admin server. So actuator should be enabled so that we can monitor our application by using admin server. So see how many dependencies I'm adding to develop one REST API as a microservice now. Eureka Discovery Client, Admin Client, Jipkin, Slate, Web Starter, DevTools, Actuator. Perfect. Now here configure enable discovery client annotation at start class. It will register, it will search and register with Eureka. Okay, so as I told you, Eureka server will be running on the port number 8761. My client will search for the Eureka and will register with the Eureka server automatically by using this annotation. Enable discovery client annotation. Okay, so this annotation is used to represent this application as a Eureka client, right? Next, the third one, create REST controller with required methods. Create REST controller with required methods. Then configure below properties in application.yml. Configure the below properties in the application.yml. What are those? Server port, admin server URL, server port, admin server URL, actuator endpoints, actuator endpoints, actuator endpoints. Okay, guys. So these are the steps we need to follow to develop one REST API. These are the steps we need to follow to develop one REST API. Develop REST API, that is a welcome API. So these are the dependencies I'm going to use. Discovery client, admin client, Jipkin, Slate, web starter, DevTools, actuator. How can we represent this application as a Eureka client? To represent this application as a Eureka client, I'm using enable discovery client annotation. Then I will create a REST controller with required methods. Then I will configure port number, server port, admin server URL, actuator endpoints, and application name. For this application, I will give some name also. Okay, let's start. Let's go here, create one project now. Create one project. That project is going to become 46 project. Let me stop all the servers now. We'll start them later. I'm going to create one project called 46 project. File, new, Spring starter project. So this is 46 SBMS welcome API. Welcome API. Next, dependencies. DevTools, web dependency, DevTools, web dependency, actuator, admin client dependency, Eureka client dependency, Jipkin dependency, Jipkin client dependency, Slate dependency I'm using. So total how many dependencies? 7 dependencies: dev tools, Slate, Jipkin client, Actuator, code-centric Spring admin client, Eureka discovery client, and Spring web dependency. Click on next, click on finish. So I created one application that is called Welcome API. That is my actual microservice, my actual REST API, my actual REST API. Okay, go to the pom.xml and observe this. Go to the pom.xml and observe this. Spring Boot starter actuator. Spring Boot starter actuator. Spring Boot starter web. Admin starter client. Slate Jipkin. Eureka client. Cloud starter Slate. DevTools. So all the dependencies we have added. Let me create one simple REST controller in this project. Welcome REST controller to send a request, guys. I'm using welcome REST controller. Welcome REST controller. Now let us see. I'm making this as a REST controller by using @REST controller annotation. I'm using this as a REST controller, @REST controller. Let me write one method, public string welcome message. Okay, so here I am writing string message is equal to welcome to Ashok IT. Then return message. Let me bind this to slash get mapping with slash welcome. Just one dummy method I'm writing inside my REST controller. One dummy method I'm writing inside my REST controller, that is slash welcome. Perfect. Now go to properties file, convert that to YML. I'm using application.yml. Now let us start writing the properties. Okay, I'm using server.port, that is 8081. Server.port 8081. You can give anything. Then I'm going to configure a name for this application. Spring.application.name. I will give the name as a welcome API. So what is this project? On which port number you want to run? I want to run this project on the port number 8081, and I want to name this application as a welcome API. And I want this application to register with admin server. Eureka server registry will happen automatically because it is running on the 8761. Okay, now I want to register this application with admin server. I want to register this application with admin server. How can we do that? Spring dot boot dot admin dot client dot URL. Okay, what is the URL of your admin server? That you need to specify. http:// localhost : 1111/. That's it. My admin server is running on the port number 1111. You see, admin server port number is 1111. So I'm telling that this welcome API should register with the admin server. The name of this API is welcome API. This should be running on the port number 8081. Now, for Eureka, you no need to specify. It will work by default. For example, if your Eureka running on the different port, then what you need to do? Eureka dot client dot service URL, client dot service URL default zone. Client dot service URL, you can specify default zone where the Eureka server is running. You can specify localhost : 8761/Eureka. If you write this property, your Eureka can have any port number. When the Eureka port number is 8761, this step is optional, guys. Understood? If Eureka server is running, is this step mandatory or this step is optional? When the Eureka running in the same machine with the 8761, is this mandatory step or it is optional step? It is optional. Okay. So if Eureka running on the different port, you can write this port number on which port your Eureka running. Then this client application will register with the Eureka server. Perfect. Next one, actuators I want to enable. Management dot, we already discussed about the actuators, right? Management dot, endpoint dot, web dot, exposure dot, include star. I want to enable all the actuator endpoints of my welcome API. So these are the properties we are going to configure in the application.yml. Server port, name of the application, server port, name of the application, server port, name of the application, and client URL, admin client URL, admin server URL to represent this as a client with the server, Eureka server URL, actuator endpoints. That's it. That's it. Run the application and check Eureka dashboard. Run the application, send a request, run the application and check Eureka dashboard, admin server dashboard, and Zipkin dashboard. Run the application. Run the application and check Eureka dashboard, admin server dashboard, and Zipkin dashboard. So there are 3 dashboards available. Our application acting as a client for 3 servers. Okay, so make sure your admin server, Eureka server, Zipkin server, all 3 are running. Let me run my service registry first. Let me update my welcome API. Maven update project, force update. I'm updating my project. Very good. Service registry, run as boot application. I'm running this project. Service registry project I am running, which will be running on the port number 8761. Let's access it. Yes, Eureka server is running on the port number 8761. Currently, any service registered with Eureka? Currently, no service registered with the Eureka. Very good. Let's run the admin server. Why I am using different port numbers? All the applications are running in the same machine. That's why I'm using different port numbers. For admin server, I have given the port number as 1111. For admin server, I have given the port number as 1111. Okay, admin server is running, but currently any application registered with the admin server, no application registered with the admin server currently. Guys, any application registered with the admin server currently? No application registered with the admin server currently. Any application registered with the admin server currently? No application registered with the admin server currently. No application registered with the admin server currently. No application registered with the admin server currently. Chalo. Now Zipkin server is already running. Currently nothing is available in the Zipkin also. Chalo. 3 projects are ready. Eureka is running, admin server running, Zipkin is running. Now I will run my service one. I mean to say my API one. My API one is running on which port number? My API one will be running on which port number, guys? What is the port I am using for API one? It is 8081. Port is equal to 8081 I am using. Port number I am using as 8081 for my API one. Okay. Let's run this. Welcome API. Run as boot application. run as boot application. I'm running my API 1, that is my welcome API. I'm running welcome API. Welcome API is a project which is having a Slate logging purpose. This welcome API acting as a client for Eureka, acting as a client for admin server, acting as a client for Jipkin server also. Chalo, let's go to Eureka and refresh. Wow, can you see? Welcome API registered with Eureka server as a client. Instances currently registered with Eureka. Can you see welcome API registered with Eureka automatically? Come on, guys. Come on. Are you able to see welcome API registered with Eureka? Yes. Now go to admin server. Can you see welcome API registered with admin server also? Welcome API registered with the admin server also? Yes. Go to Eureka and see this name of the application welcome API. I gave that name in the YML file as a application name. As a application name, I have given welcome API. Okay. I told that this application should register with Eureka. This application should register with admin server. This application should register with the Jipkin server. Perfect. Now this is my application. Let's access. By default, it is accessing actuator info endpoint. Nothing is available /welcome. Are we able to access our backend API, welcome API, which is giving welcome to Ashok IT as a response? Yes, which is giving welcome to Ashok IT as a response. So currently it is running in my local machine. My API is running. Now go to Jipkin, run the query. Can you see? I have sent one request for welcome API. How much time it took to process that request? 6 milliseconds it has taken to process that request. Okay guys, welcome API trace ID. So when you click on this welcome API show, it is going to give you all the details. So a request came to welcome API, a get request came get request came with the /welcome URL pattern get request came to /welcome URL, welcome REST controller executed. In that welcome message method got executed. How much time it took to process that request also, everything it is showing. So can I say this is a log tracing? Can I say this is a log tracing now? Service name is the welcome API. Minimum duration, maximum duration. Minimum duration and maximum duration, like this you can run your query. Welcome API received one request. If I send one more request, if I send one more request, if I send one more request, go to Jipkin, run the query. See how many requests came to welcome API? How many requests came to welcome API? Total I have sent 4 requests. First time it took more time. Now it is taking less time to process my requests. So with this, can you understand how much time it is taking to process each request and where it is going slow? Can we figure out that by using this log tracing? Can I figure out this by using log tracing? Yes. In the Eureka, our service is registered. My welcome API acting as a client for Eureka. In the Eureka dashboard, I can see what are the clients available, what are the backend APIs available, what is the status of the API, and what is the URL of the API. In the admin server, I can see, what are the applications currently registered. Click on this. Now can you see all the details, heap details, non-heap details, threads details, process details, loggers, mappings. So actuator endpoints, beans, environment, configuration properties. So whatever the actuators we configured, can we monitor the actuator endpoints by using this admin server project now? Whatever the theory I have explained here, are we able to prove it practically? Service registry to register all the services, Admin server is used to monitor all the backend APIs at one place. Endpoints we can monitor at one place. Jipkin server is used for log tracing. Backend APIs we are developing. Backend API is acting as a client for service registry, for admin server, for Jipkin server. So is it proved everything? Whatever we discussed, is it proved practically now? Is it proved practically now? One REST API acting as a client for service registry, acting as a client for admin server, acting as a client for Jipkin server. समझे? Yes or no? Similarly, can we develop one more REST API? Can we develop one more microservice in the project? And can we make it as a client for Eureka? Can we make it as a client for admin server and Jipkin server? Can we do one more API development now? Is it difficult? Is it difficult now to develop one more API? No. Can we develop one more API now? Can we develop one more API now? So this time I will develop a API with a inter-service communication. So already one API development is completed. That API is running successfully. We are able to access that API / welcome. Chalo, welcome to Ashok IT. I'm able to access it. Fine. Now I want to develop one more API. For that API, I want to keep inter-service communication. Can you tell me what is inter-service communication? Can you guys tell me what is inter-service communication? Come on, guys. What is inter-service communication? One API will access another API. So which one we are going to use to establish inter-service communication? What is the concept available in the microservices in the Spring Cloud to achieve inter-service communication? PN client is available. PN client is available. Chalo. Now I am going to develop one more REST API with the PN client. That is my step 5, guys. Same procedure, one extra step will be there. This is my step 5. Step 5. Develop REST API. This time I will give it as a greet API. I will develop the greet API. Along with all these things, I will use one more dependency called PN client. What is the new dependency I have added now? Develop a REST API. This time I am making that REST API as a greet API. In this greet API, I am using PN client. In this greet API, I am using PN client. The remaining stuff is the same. Here, instead of 8081, I will configure this as 9091. Anything is fine. I will configure this as 9091. Configure enable discovery client annotation at the start class. It will search and register with the Eureka. Okay, so along with all these things, create PN client. Create PN client to access welcome API. Create PN client to access welcome API. This is the new step. We are adding a new dependency and we are adding one new step. Then it will become 5th step. Then it will become 6th step. Develop REST API. I have modified here. अरे बाबा कुछ तो गड़बड़ हुआ भाई. Where is my step 4? This is my step 5. Step 4 चले गया. I think copy paste problem. Let me do it once again properly. Step 4. This is my welcome API. For welcome API, I don't need the FIAN client. Okay. For welcome API, I don't need the FIAN client. It is 8081. This is welcome API. That is fine. Next, I need to write step 6. Step 6 or 5. Develop REST API. This one I'm going to call it as greet API. This one I'm going to call as greet API. Same procedure. One new step will be added. Same procedure. One new step will be added. So what is the new step? Instead of just developing API, I will develop API with a FIAN client. FIAN client is used to achieve inter-service communication. Now here, one new step I will write create FIAN client to access welcome API. Create FIAN client to access welcome API. This will become step 5. This will become step 6. That's it. Are you comfortable now? Read this. I'm going to develop one more REST API. That REST API name I am giving as Greet API. Create a project with these dependencies. Same thing, how we developed Welcome API. In the same way, we are going to develop the Greet API. This Greet API, I will be developing with a port number 9091. You can give anything. You can give anything. Right, guys, now. So I'm going to develop one more service. That service I'm going to run on the port number 9091. Are you guys clear? Are you guys clear? Greet API I want to develop. Already welcome API development completed. I have given the steps also. Now I want to develop this Greet API. Chalo, start. Let me stop all these things now. We will start it again. I'm stopping all these servers and APIs, guys. Everything is clean. Let's go here. File, new Spring Starter project. Okay, I'm going for 47 Spring Boot microservice Greet API. So this is my Greet API, 47th application. Next, yeah, same dependencies. Actuator, web, DevTools, Slate, Eureka server or client. Server is already there. Eureka client, admin client, Zipkin client, Slate. Next one, FIAN. Open FIAN we are going to use. FIAN client we are going to select. So total how many dependencies? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Total 8 dependencies are there. For the welcome API, 7 dependencies are available. So what dependency extra for this API? What dependency we are adding extra for this API? FIAN client. What is the purpose of the FIAN client? What is the purpose of the FIAN client? Can you tell me? Inter-service communication. Okay. Next, finish. Next and finish. Go to Greet API pom.xml. Go to Greet API, pom.xml. Can you see? Boot starter actuator is available. Web is available. Admin client available. Cloud Slate Zipkin. Eureka client. Open Fian. This is the new dependency we have added only in the Greet API, which is not there in the Welcome API. Perfect. Okay, let's go here. Let's represent this as a Eureka client. For that, I'm going to use enable discovery client, and I'm going to use enable Fian clients. So in this application, I want to use Fian client also. For that, what I will do, configure enable discovery client and enable Fian client annotations at the start class. So earlier we configured only discovery client. This time we are configuring Fian clients also, because in my application Fian client also should work. In my application Fian client also should work. So what is the meaning of the Fian client? Inter-service communication, FC. Fian client I'm using, FC. So in the service 2, Fian client is available. That Fian client is used to communicate with the service 1. Okay, for that reason, I'm writing one annotation called enable Fian clients. This annotation is used to represent this is a Eureka client application. This annotation is used to enable Fian clients in this application. Are you clear? Why I'm writing discovery client annotation? Why I'm writing Fian clients annotation? Are you clear why I'm writing discovery client annotation? Why I'm writing Fian client annotation? Right? Yeah. With the Fian client, one-way communication only will be established, guys. Only my service 2 can access service 1. Service 1 cannot access service 2 because where is the Fian client? Fian client is available at the Greet API. Fian client is available at the Greet API. So Greet API can access Welcome API. Okay, good. Perfect. Chalo. Now I need to develop REST controller with required methods. Before that step now, let me create a Fian client actually. Let me create the Fian client actually. With the Fian client, I will access Welcome API. Okay, so let's create client. Okay, so here I am making this as a client. This client to access which API? It is used to access Welcome API client. Fian client will be basically interface. That's it. It's not even class. Fian client is a interface. So why I am developing this interface, which is used to access Welcome API? That's why I'm giving this name as Welcome API client. This interface is used to access Welcome API of our application. How can we tell that it has to access Welcome API? That's where we are going to write one annotation called Fian client. Which is service you want to access? Welcome API. That is the name of the service. Am I going to give the URL to access the API? Am I going to give the name of the service to access the API? My Fian client is available in the service 2. I mean to say it is API 2. Instead of service, let me give the names as APIs now, so that you will get connected to that easily. So this is Welcome API. This is Welcome API. Now here this is Greet API. Greet API. Now where I have created Fian client, in which project Fian client is available? In which project Fian client is available, guys? Fian client available in the Welcome API or Fian client available in the Greet API? Come on. Fian client is available in the Welcome API. Fian client available in the Greet API, Fian client available in the Greet API. That means Greet API want to access Welcome API. That means Greet API want to access my Welcome API. Now I have a question. Will you access Welcome API using the URL of the Welcome API or using the name of the Welcome API? Which one is recommended? Accessing the Welcome API using the URL of that API or using the service name, which one is recommended? URL is recommended or service name is recommended? Service name is recommended. Why? URL may change in the future. Today Welcome API running in my system. Tomorrow if I deploy the Welcome API in the AWS cloud, URL will be same or URL will be different. Today Welcome API running in my system, so I will give the URL of my system Welcome API. Tomorrow application will run in the production, so the URL will be same or URL will be different. URL will be different. So giving the URL to access the Welcome API is recommended. Giving the service name is recommended to access. Come on. So my Fian client will use the URL to access. My Fian client will use a service name to access. My Fian client will use service name to access. Why I will use service name to access? URLs can change, but service name is fixed. URL can change in the future, but service name is fixed here. URL will change in the future, but service name is fixed here. Are you clear? Suppose if a Welcome API wants to talk to Greet API, then you should create a Fian client at the Welcome API also. My Greet API want to access the Welcome API. That's why I'm creating a Fian client at the Greet API. Suppose if your Welcome API want to access my Greet API, you develop a Fian client at your Welcome API to access my Greet API. That's it. Got it now? Chalo. Now I'm telling to my Fian client, this name, this interface name can be anything. This interface name can be anything. So I'm representing this interface with a Fian client. Name is equal to Welcome API. What is the meaning of name is equal to Welcome API? I am telling to this Fian client, you need to access Welcome API. So Fian client is having a name. From where this Fian client will get the URL for this API now? Fian client will internally talks to service registry. Fian client will internally talks to service registry. Can we find URLs from the service registry? Can we find URLs from the service registry? Yes. So for the Fian client, I am not going to give the URL. The reason URL will change in the future. Service name is not going to change in the future. That's why for the Fian client, I will give the name as Welcome API. The name is not going to change in the future, but URL may change in the future. For the Fian client, you have a option to give the URL as well as to give the name. Can I give the URL also to access Welcome API? Can I give like this? http://localhost:8081/welcome. Can I give like this? Yes, I can give like this. But what is the problem if I give the URL like this? Always your project will run in your local system. Tomorrow your project will deploy in the cloud. Then this URL will not work. Then again you need to change your Fian client logic. So which one is the recommended option? Which one is the recommended option? Going with the URL is recommended or going with the service name is recommended? Going with the URL is recommended or going with the service name is recommended? If you deploy your application in any system, service name is not going to change. That already we configured in the YML. Now you understand why I am taking service name instead of taking the URL? Now you understood why I am taking service name instead of taking the URL? You got the clarity? Chalo. Now what this PN client should do? This PN client should send invoke welcome API. So what is the URL to access the welcome API? Get mapping / welcome is the URL pattern. That's it. / welcome is the URL pattern. That's it. This is my PN client logic to access welcome API. So welcome API having / welcome as a URL pattern. My PN client should send a get request to the welcome API with / welcome as a URL pattern. So when you call this method, then PN client will send a / welcome get request to welcome API URL. PN client will talk to service registry and it will get the URL of the welcome API dynamically. For that URL, it is going to send a get request with / welcome. Lot of things will happen internally. Sir, this is a interface na. How this will execute? Spring Cloud will provide the implementation internally. How our data JPA got implementation in the runtime? Similarly, for the PN client also, we will get the implementation in the runtime. You just need to create the interface. You no need to write the logic for this. You no need to implement this interface. Implementation will come in the runtime. How beautiful it is. We are able to access one application from another application just with the interface. We are able to access one application from another application just with one interface. How beautiful. How advanced coding is implemented in that internally. Still, we are struggling to learn how to connect with JDBC. But how coding is happening in the industry, guys? How the frameworks are working internally? You see, just with the interface, we are able to access one application from another application. That too without giving the URL. Lot of things are happening internally when you use these Spring Cloud concepts. When we use the Spring Cloud concepts, lot of things are happening internally. Okay, are you able to understand the PN client logic now? Are you able to understand the PN client logic now? So PN client is a class or PN client is a interface? PN client is a class or PN client is a interface? PN client is a interface. Do I need to implement this interface or implementation will come in the runtime? Okay, this PN client is going to access which API now? This PN client is going to access which API now? PN client will access which API now? Welcome API. So how PN client will understand URL of the welcome API? How PN client will understand the URL of the welcome API? Where it will get the URL, from where it will get the URL? It will contact service registry. It will contact Eureka server. PN client will talk to Eureka server and PN client will tell, hey Eureka, this is the name of the service. Can you give me URL of this service? Then Eureka will give the URL. For the welcome API URL, PN client will send what request with which URL pattern? What kind of request will go to the welcome API and what is the URL pattern it is going to use to send the request for welcome API? Come on. Get request with / welcome. How PN client will understand that it has to send get request with / welcome? I have written one abstract method. So if I call this abstract method, what will happen? PN client will send / welcome get request to welcome API URL. It will get the welcome API URL from service registry. That is from Eureka server. Damn sure question in the interview. What is PN client? PN client is used to achieve inter-service communication. Do I need to use a REST template? Do I need to use a web client now? Do I need to use a REST template? Do I need to use a web client now for inter-service communication? Can I go with the PN client directly? Can I go with the VN client directly? Can we access external clients also by using VN client? Can we access third-party APIs also by using VN client? Yes, we can access, but we should give the URL. We can access third-party APIs also by using VN client, but we need to give the URL, not the name. Not the name. Okay, now total how many ways we can make a HTTP request programmatically in the Spring Boot? One is REST template, another one is web client, third one is VN client. You got it? Chalo. So with this, our VN client is ready. Let's create one REST controller. Greet REST controller. I'm going to create Greet REST controller. Click on finish. So let's make it as REST controller by using REST controller annotation. Now I want to inject VN client here. That is welcome API client. Interface na. If I inject the interface, what will happen? Object will be created for interface, or object implementation of interface will be object will be created for the interface, or object will be created for the interface implementation. If I do this auto wiring, what will happen now? Just to remember our JPA concept. Custom repository we created. Object will be created in the runtime. Okay. Now let's do public string get greet message. Public string get greet message. Okay. So string greet public string greet message is equal to good morning. Good morning. Now can I access welcome API also now? Welcome client dot invoke welcome API. Now I got welcome message. Can I send combined response now? Return greet message plus welcome message. Can I send a combined response? Can I send a combined response? So now I'm going to bind this method to get mapping with /greet. So when you send a request to /greet URL pattern, what is happening? Is it just sending the greet response? It is invoking welcome by using VN client and sending a combined response. Now you see my greet REST controller. Is it sending just good morning, or it is going to send the combined response of greet API and welcome API? How I am getting the welcome message? I'm calling VN client dot method. VN client will access that REST API, welcome API, and it will give the response. So can I say that I'm sending a combined response now? Can I say that I'm sending a combined response now? Got it? Perfect. What is the next step? Once we created the VN client and REST controller, configure the properties. Chalo, configure the properties. Application properties na convert the properties to YML. Application.yml. I will configure server.port 9091, any port number. Spring.application.name. This name I'm giving as greet API. This name I'm giving as greet API. Any name you can give. Can I register this also with the admin server? Yes. How can I register this with admin server? boot.admin.client.url. So on which URL our admin server is running? http://localhost:1111. That is the URL of admin server. Okay, Let us configure Eureka. By default, it is running on 8761. So configuring Eureka is optional. It is running on 8761. http://localhost:/8761/Eureka. Let us enable actuator endpoints. Management dot endpoint dot endpoints dot web dot exposure dot include. I'm going to include star. Okay, these all are the properties I am configuring. These properties for greet API. These are the properties of my greet API. Instead of 8081, I'm giving 9091. Name I am giving as greet API. I'm registering this greet API with admin server. I'm registering this greet API with Eureka. I'm enabling actuator endpoints. That's it. Okay, with this we are good to go with welcome API and greet API. Update Maven project. Force update. Very good. Now let us run one by one. First, I'm going to run service registry. Run the service registry. Service registry will be running on the port number 8761. Observe this diagram. Service registry will be running on the port number 8761. Service registry will be running on the port number 8761. Okay, go to the dashboard. Yeah, currently any instances registered with Eureka? Instances currently registered with Eureka. Any instances currently registered with Eureka? Guys, can you tell me? Any instances currently registered with Eureka? No. Admin server. It is not started. Okay, let's start the admin server. Run the admin server. Admin server will be running on the port number 1111. Service registry running on the port number 8761. Admin server running on the port number 1111. Access it. Any application registered with admin server now? No. Okay, go to Zipkin. Nothing is available in the Zipkin. Okay, Zipkin is also ready. So 3 applications are ready first. Eureka is ready, admin server is ready, Zipkin server is also ready. Service registry running on the port number 8761. Admin server running on the port number 1111. Zipkin server running on the port number 9411. Now let me run welcome API. Welcome API will be running on the port number 8081. Welcome API running on the port number 8081. This welcome API acting as a client for service registry, acting as a client for admin server, acting as a client for Zipkin server. Welcome API acting as a client for Eureka server will be acting as a client for admin server, will be acting as a client for Zipkin server. Let's go and see the Eureka dashboard. Now can you see welcome API registered with Eureka. Now go to admin server. Welcome API registered with admin server also. Finally, let us run our greet API. Let us run the greet API. Let us run our greet API. Okay. Run as boot application. I'm running my greet API. Greet API is also acting as a client for Eureka, acting as a client for admin server, acting as a client for Zipkin server. And one special thing about the greet API is in this greet API we are having FIN client. What is the purpose of the FIN client? FIN client is used for inter-service communication. What is the meaning of inter-service communication? In our application, there are two APIs available. If you want to access one API from the another API, then it is called as inter-service communication. So to achieve that inter-service communication, I am using FIN client. So FIN client I created in the Greet API. That FIN client is used to access Welcome API. Okay, now let us see the Eureka. Wow, can you see Welcome API is registered with Eureka and Greet API also registered with Eureka. Welcome API running on the port number 8081. Greet API running on the port number 9091. Go to the admin server. Can you see two applications registered with the admin server? Can you see two applications registered with admin server? Welcome API registered with admin server. Greet API also registered with admin server. Can we monitor these two applications from the admin server now? The URLs, beans, config properties, JVM details, mappings, cache details, and heap dump, thread dump. Can we manage these applications from admin server now? Admin server is providing a user interface to monitor all your APIs at one place. Eureka server is providing the details of all the APIs running in our application. What is the name of the API? What is the status of the API? What is the URL of the API? All that data we can get from Eureka. From admin server, we can monitor and manage all the applications. So this Jipkin server is used to provide you the execution details of each request. Currently, I have not sent any request. That's why I am not getting any results in the Jipkin. Okay, now can we access these APIs now? Can we access these APIs now? Guys, come on, can we access these APIs now? Which one you want me to access first? Which API you want me to access first? Welcome API, yeah? Greet API, yeah. First, let's access welcome. Okay, I'm clicking on welcome API. By default, when I click on this URL, it is going to actuator info endpoint. Okay, so let's remove this access/welcome. When I send a request to welcome, am I able to get welcome to Ashok IT? That means, can I say my first API working as expected? Can I say my first API working as expected? Come on, guys. Can I say that my first API is working as expected? Now, if I send a request for the second API, what is the expected response? When I send a request for the Greet API, I should get only good morning, or I should get good morning plus welcome to Ashok IT. When I send a request for Greet API, what response I should get now? Why I should get to combined response? Why you are expecting combined response? Why are you expecting combined response? What is the reason? Inter-service communication. When you send a request for the Greet API internally will access Welcome API. Chalo, let's try this. Go to Greet API. भगवान को नमस्कार करो सब लोग. All of you, pray for God. Done. Completed. Jai Shri Ram. Chalo. /greet. Perfect. भगवान सुन लिया यार. Are we able to get the response? Are we able to get the combined response? So are we able to achieve inter-service communication? I'm sending a request for /greet. When I send a request for /greet, what happened? I got good morning. I got welcome to Ashok IT. Who is giving this message welcome to Ashok IT? Is it a hard-coded response in the Greet API, or it is a dynamic response from the Welcome API? If you see my Greet REST controller, when you see Greet REST controller, am I hard coding welcome to Ashok IT message anywhere in the Greet REST controller, or it is coming from Welcome API dynamically through FIN client? Welcome to Ashok IT message coming, hard coded message in the Greet API, or that message coming from Welcome API? That message coming from Welcome API. Perfect. We are able to achieve inter-service communication through FIAN clients. Wow, we are able to complete a lot today. We are able to complete this part as of now. Are we done with this part, guys? Are we done with this part? Creating service registry, creating admin server, creating Zipkin server, creating welcome API, creating greet API, creating FIAN client, achieving inter-service communication, monitor the logs by using Zipkin now. Go to the Zipkin now, run this query. Now see, I sent a request for greet API. Wow, see here, when I access the request which I sent to the greet API, what it is telling? Boss, your request not processed by only greet API, your request received by welcome API also. Your request received by welcome API also. How much time the welcome API took to process your request, and what is the total time taken by greet API to process? So with this, can you understand which is service is taking more time to process our request when the application is slow? When our application is slow, can we easily understand which is service is taking more time to process our request? When you send a request to the application, multiple REST APIs will execute in the backend to process your request. Your request may not be processed by single REST API. In the real time, your request may be processed by executing multiple REST APIs in the backend. So when multiple REST APIs involved in processing your request, how can you troubleshoot which API is taking more time than expected? Zipkin. Zipkin is the solution for you. Now you see, when I come to the Zipkin, clearly it is telling me when I send a request to the greet API, it is saying that request processed by greet and internally greet communicated with the welcome. When I click on show, it is telling me clearly, boss, your request received by greet, greet internally communicated with the welcome. Welcome API taken 15 milliseconds. 15 milliseconds. Greet API taken total 241. In the 241, 15 milliseconds taken by welcome API. Samjhe? Samjhe all of you? Send one more request for the greet API. Send one more request for the greet API and go to Zipkin. Go to Zipkin. Run this query. Run this query. Okay, guys. Few seconds ago, just now I sent the request for the Zipkin. Few seconds ago. Now see how much time it has taken now. What is the time it has taken? Total time it has taken. It is going to show you. Now total 13 milliseconds it has taken. 13 milliseconds taken only by the greet API. In that 13 milliseconds, some time is taken by welcome API also. My response is combined. There is a inter-service communication. When I send a request for the greet API is talking to welcome API internally. Welcome API is taking 4 milliseconds. So total execution time of my request 13 milliseconds. 13 minus 4, that is the total time taken by greet API. So can you understand this now? Which API taking more time to process our request? Now you realize the importance of the Zipkin. Okay, now I want to see thread details of my APIs. I want to see thread details of my API. Where we can find the thread details of our APIs? Where I can monitor my APIs? Where I can manage my APIs? Come on. Do I need to access actuators separately, or already we have admin server to monitor and manage our APIs? Do I need to monitor and manage my APIs separately? Am I having admin server to monitor and manage my APIs? Admin server. Go to admin server. Two APIs registered with admin server. Welcome API, greet API. Go to greet API. Now click on this white bar. There you can see health of your application. You can see health of your application, and you can see beans. You can see environment. You can see loggers. People may ask in the interview, Can you change the log level of your application without restarting the server? Can we change the log level of my application without restarting the server? Can I manage my application log level without restarting the server? In the Spring Boot, the default log level is info. Okay. Evening in the JRTP yesterday we discussed the default log level in the Spring Boot is info. Now I want to change the log level from info to debug. Do I need to restart the server? Just I will select debug. Okay. Now my application log level change it to debug. Where I am managing my application, am I changing the code in the project? Am I changing any YML file to change the log level? Directly I am changing the log level by using admin server. Come on guys, fast. Where I am changing the log level of my application? Where I am changing the log level of my application? Log level I am changing in the admin server. Okay guys. Log level I'm changing in the admin server. Perfect. So if in the interview, if they ask you a question, can we change the log level of the Spring Boot application without restarting the server? Can we change the log level of the Spring Boot application without restarting the server? What is your answer now? Can we do that? Can we do that? Can we change the log level of our boot application without restarting the server? What is the option? What is the solution? Admin server. By using Spring Boot admin server, we can change the log level of our boot application without restarting the servers. You got the clarity? You got the clarity? Okay. Now, can we complete the last part now? Can we complete the last part, another 15 minutes? Can we complete the last part? Guys, if I can explain tomorrow, but you will miss the flow. You will miss the flow. Already we are in the sync now. What is service registry? What is admin server? What is Jipkin? What is welcome? What is greet? Which port number? We are in the flow. So another 15 minutes, if we spend, then you will get the full clarity on what is this microservice architecture. Really, you will enjoy working with microservices. Now, by this time, you might have realized. By this time, you might have realized. Okay. Are you in love with microservices now? Are you in love with microservices now? Yes, it's a beautiful concept, guys. It's a beautiful concept. Beautiful concept. Once you start working with microservices, you will enjoy it like anything. You will enjoy it like anything. All right. Now, let's get started with our last part. What is the last part in this diagram, guys? In our mini project, what is the last part? What is the last part in our mini project? What is the last part in our mini project now? API gateway. Can you tell me what is the purpose of API gateway? Can you tell me what is the purpose of API gateway? Come on. What is the purpose of API gateway? It is the entry point for our request. Now, simple example, our application having backend APIs. Can we give the URLs of the backend APIs directly for the public users to access our application? Can I give the URLs to the public people directly to access my application now? Can I give like this? Can I give the URLs of the welcome API, greet API? Bhaiya, if you want to access my welcome API, take this URL. If you want to access greet API, take this URL. If you want to access cart API, take this URL. If you want to access report API, take this URL. So if you have 20 services, Can you give 20 URLs to the public to access your application? Or you need to provide a single entry point to access your application? Are you going to provide all your backend API URLs to the public to access, or we need to provide a single entry point to access our application? Single entry point. How can we achieve single entry point to access our all the backend APIs? Anybody who want to access my backend APIs should access API gateway. My API gateway will decide that request should be processed or that request should not be processed. If the request should be processed, then which is service should process that request? That routing also will be there in the API gateway. So API gateway is a entry point for our microservices based application. Microservices based application nothing but collection of REST APIs will be available in the backend. Microservices based application nothing but collection of REST APIs will be available in the backend. We don't give the access for our REST APIs to the public users directly. If anybody want to access our APIs, they should access our API gateway. If anybody want to come into my house, they should come from the main gate only. At the main gate, I will decide whether that person should be allowed inside or should not be allowed inside. Samjha? For your house, one main gate will be available. So any outside person who want to come into your house, they should come through main gate. At the main gate, they will do the calling bell. We will see that. If that person known to us, we will invite him inside the house. If that person is unknown to us, we don't invite inside the house. We'll talk outside only. Are you clear? Same concept here. In my project, there are several backend APIs are available. I don't want to provide the access for the backend APIs directly for the users. So users should not be able to access my API directly like this. This is not allowed. If anybody want to access Greet API, what they should do? They should access API gateway. What is this API gateway? API gateway will act as an entry point for our backend APIs. It acts as mediator between end users and backend APIs. API gateway contains filters and routing. What is the purpose of filters? Filters we are going to use to authenticate incoming request. So by using a filter, I will decide whether to process this request or not. Whatever the incoming request is coming, if any person is coming into your main gate, you need to check whether we need to allow the person or we should not allow that person. Similarly, when a request comes to my application, my filter will check, do we need to allow the request or not? If request is valid, we need to allow, but which API should execute? Do we have the business logic in the API gateway for processing a request? Where is the business logic available to process a request? Business logic is available in the API gateway, or business logic is available in the backend APIs? Business logic is available in the API gateway, or business logic is available in the backend API? Backend API. So how API gateway will understand which request should go to which backend API? How API gateway will understand which request should go to which backend API? API gateway also should register with the service registry, and routing will be available. Based on the routing, API gateway will talk to service registry and will forward the request to actual service in the backend. That is called backend API, REST API. So now, without knowing the RESTful services, can you develop microservices? Microservice is more or less a configuration part. That's it. The main business logic we are developing in the REST APIs only. So our microservices started just yesterday. Microservices started 1 month back for us. Guys, microservices started just yesterday. Microservices started 1 month back. 1 month back our microservices started, but you don't know that I'm teaching microservices from 1 month. What we discussed in the last 1 month? What we discussed in the last 1 month? REST API. So microservices means collection of REST API. So microservice started 1 month back, not just yesterday. Samjhe? Microservices started 1 month back for us, not just yesterday. Okay, from yesterday, I gave the title as microservices. But actually we are doing the microservices development from 1 month. If you are developing a REST API, one REST API can be called as one microservice. The only difference is we have not used service registry, admin server, Jipkin server, API gateway in the last 1 month. From today, we are using this. That is the only difference. Microservices started 1 month back. Collection of REST APIs is called one microservices based project. Collection of REST APIs is called one microservices based project. Good. Now let us start the API gateway now. Let us start the API gateway. Let me stop my applications, guys. I will, once my API gateway is ready, then I am going to start them again. I'm going to start them again. Okay, last topic for today's session, guys. घर वाले गाली दे रहे हैं क्या? सुबह से लैपटॉप पकड़ के बैठा क्या कर रहा भाई? खाना भी नहीं खा रहा. कौन है वो फैकल्टी? गाली दे रहा क्या? खाने को भी नहीं छोड़ रहा बोल के दे रहा है गाली. Tell them that we are learning the most important subject today. This is the one which will give you the job. In every interview, every topic we discuss today will be asked. Every topic we discuss today will be asked in the interview. Damn sure. Up to 5 years experienced people, these questions will come. I think you enjoyed it today. Luckily, we got this session on Sunday. So if I don't take this on Sunday, that flow will not be there because it is a big concept. If I split this into 3 days, generally if I take a regular class for this, it will take 3 days to 4 days, 4 hours we spent. If I take the same concept 4 days, itna flow acha nahi hota. I mean, it will not be good. It will not be good. So that's the reason you people are lucky. You got it on Sunday. For previous batches, sometimes we got in the regular days. If we get this topic in the weekdays, one day we will discuss about service registry and admin server Jipkin. Next day we will develop a backend. Next day we will develop API gateway. That flow, that connectivity will be missed if we divide into multiple days. So that is the reason within single day I want to complete one project so that you will have full clarity. You will be in that flow. Maja nahi aata. Yes, that's true. If we learn this concept in the regular class, this much interest will not be there. To be frank, this much interest will not be there if I split this topic in the regular classes. Good. Hazel is from other country. It is 1:30 a.m. for him. Thank you, Hazel, for your interest, man. I think you are enjoying the session. Today your weekend is gone. Your sleep also you sacrificed. Good. Good, man. One day. So fine. This is for you guys. A beautiful session we planned today. Chalo. So shall we develop our last part of this today's session and today's mini project? Right. Yeah. Before going to start it, one person asked a very good question. Tarak asked a good question. Jipkin server running separately, how our APIs are able to connect with the Jipkin? So Jipkin server 9411 port is available, right? Internally, the Spring Boot application, I'm using Jipkin client. Here, if you see in the Spring Boot application, I'm using Jipkin client. When I use the Jipkin client, it will search for the Jipkin server by default with the 9411 port in the same machine. As the Jipkin is running in the same machine with 9411 port, my APIs are able to register with the Jipkin server by default. In these APIs, if you remember in the development step, I have given one step. You need to add Jipkin client also in the dependency. In the welcome API dependency, I'm adding a Jipkin client. In the greet API dependency, I'm adding a Jipkin client. As the client dependency available, It is searching for the Zipkin server with the default port and it is registering with the Zipkin server. Very good question. Tarak, you got my point now? How your APIs are registering with Zipkin? Because it's a valid question. For service registry, we are writing a property to register with the service registry. We are writing a property to register with the admin server. Without writing any property, how your API connecting with Zipkin server? Default port. Default port. Got it? Perfect. All right. Now let me create my API gateway. File, new, Spring Starter project, 48 application, Spring Boot microservice, API gateway. API gateway. Guys, to create the API gateway, what are the dependencies we need to use? What are the dependencies we need to use to create the API gateway? Let me write the steps so that you can practice it. Joule proxy or cloud gateway. I need to use a Joule proxy or I need to use a cloud gateway. Come on. Develop API gateway. Joule proxy outdated and removed from the versions. Develop API gateway application. API gateway is going to act as single entry point for our application. Okay. Create boot application with below dependencies. Create boot application with below dependencies. What are those? Web starter, dev tools, web starter, dev tools, and most important thing is the cloud gateway. Most important thing is the cloud gateway Eureka client. Now API gateway is going to act as a client with the Eureka gateway is going to act as a client for Eureka. API gateway also will be registered with the Eureka server. API gateway also will act as a client for the Eureka server. That's why I'm adding Eureka client dependency, and this application is going to register with Eureka server as a Eureka client and cloud gateway, web starter, dev tools. That's it. Next one, configure enable discovery client annotation at the boot start class. We need to represent that as a client. Configure enable discovery client annotation at boot start class. Configure enable discovery client annotation at boot start class. Then next one, configure routings in application.yml. Guys, this routing will be little confusing, guys. Observe carefully. Configure API gateway, configure APIs routing, configure API routings in application.yml. Configure API routings in the application.yml. Configure server port and API routings in the application.yml. So if you can do this, then we are good. Run the application and test it. Run the application and test it. Perfect. Chalo. I'm going to create a project now. File, new, starter project. I'm going to create a project 48 application, Spring Boot microservice, API gateway. Okay. Click on next. Yeah, dependencies. I'm going to use web dependency and I'm going to use what is that? Eureka discovery client, and I'm going to use cloud gateway. This is the most important now. This is the most important. See here, Spring Cloud routing gateway is available. Can you check Joule is available? Guys, are we getting the Joule proxy? Is the Joule dependency available or Joule dependency removed from the Spring Boot? Joule is available or Joule is removed? Joule is removed. So which one we are having now? Cloud gateway. Okay, access this cloud gateway. DevTools, DevTools, that's it. DevTools, discovery client, cloud gateway, web dependency. Next, finish. Perfect, perfect. Yep, let's go to pom.xml and let's check it. Guys, see cloud version 2021.0.3. This is the cloud version we are using. Webflux dependency coming, gateway is coming, Eureka client is coming, DevTools coming, test dependency we got. Okay, chalo. Now let's make it as discovery client so that it will register with Eureka server. Enable discovery client. Okay, fine. Cloud gateway dependency already available. You no need to make any change for that. You just to configure your routings. Application.yml. Let me make the change. Server port is equal to 3333. API gateway port number I have given 3333. Chalo. The most important thing, guys, now routing. Now the most important thing is the routing. Okay. Observe carefully how I am going to do this routing. Spring dot application dot name is equal to API gateway. I'm giving some name. Server port 3333, application name API gateway. Server port is 3333, application name API gateway. Chalo. Routings. Observe now. Spring dot cloud dot gateway. Spring dot cloud dot gateway discovery locator enabled, discovery locator enabled true. It has to search for that. Okay, lowercase service ID, yes, true. My service ID can be available in the lowercase. Service ID is nothing but the service name, guys. So this is the service name. Now I'm going to tell to cloud gateway discovery locator, you have to identify that true. Locate lower service ID, yes, that is also true. Now next one, I need to specify routes. I need to specify routes. Okay, routes. Routes, one route or multiple routes. How many APIs we have? Do we need to route the request to one API or you need to route the request to two APIs based on the URL pattern? One route is available or we need to do two routes now? Two routes. So first route, I'm giving the ID as a welcome API. You can give any name. You can give any name. First routing ID is welcome API. First routing ID I'm giving as a welcome API. Second routing ID I'm specifying for greet API. So that means I want to do two routings. One routing I want to do for welcome API. Another routing I want to do for greet API. When the request should go to this welcome API, when the request should go to greet API, that is what we are going to specify as a URL pattern. We are going to specify as a URL pattern. URI load balancer slash welcome API, then predicates path, predicates path is slash welcome. Predicate it is slash welcome. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? Whenever a request comes with the slash welcome as a URL pattern, inside the predicates, I want to write the path. Inside the predicates, I want to write the path. So inside this predicates, whenever a request comes with this slash welcome URL pattern, I want to send it to slash welcome service. That is a welcome API. So similarly, here I'm having a greet API. for the greet API also, I will specify the URI, the name of the service. That means I'm giving LB, that means load balancer, greet API. Greet, I'm not redirecting the request to base, I'm not redirecting the request based on the URL. I'm redirecting the request based on the service name. How to specify the service name for the routing? So see here, what is the meaning of this routing? What is the meaning of this routing? Whenever a request comes to /welcome, it should go to welcome API, load balancer name. I'm not giving the URL. I'm giving the name of the service. So this is the routing. This is my first routing. ID can be anything. You can give ABC also, or you can give one also. Routing one. So whenever a request comes with the /welcome, then it should go to welcome API. That is the meaning of that. That is the meaning of that. Samjha? ID, URI, predicates. In the predicates, I'm specifying the path. Okay, I'm getting some error. 1 second. Predicates, path. So what is the path? If the path is /welcome, I want to route it to welcome API. Right now, let me see. Next one, ID 2, second routing. For second routing URI, I will give LB. This should be greet API, predicates, 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 path. It is /greet, /greet. Okay, whenever a request comes to /welcome, it should go to welcome API. Whenever a request come to /greet, it should go to greet API. It should go to greet API. That is the meaning of my YML. Okay, guys. Path lowercase also not. We'll try this. Predicates path /welcome, path /greet. It is not accepting. Let me do cloud gateway routings. Can you let me search it? Cloud gateway routes predicates. Cloud gateway route predicates. Can we let me check it here? Any help from the internet? Predicates /path only, hyphen path only, na? Route ID URI predicates. ID URI predicates. In the predicate, hyphen path only. Path capital only. In the predicates, hyphen path /welcome /greet. Let me update the project. Let me try. Maven update. Update the Maven project. Yep, it's updated. Let's do one round of testing, guys. Project clean all the projects. Clean all the projects. Done. Update this Maven project. Update. Okay. Let's run the service registry first. I'm running my service registry. I'm running my service registry. Service registry is running on the port number 8761. Currently in my service registry, no instances are available. Okay, let's go to admin server. Let's go to admin server. Let's go to admin server. Admin server is also running now. Check it. Admin server is also running. Now let's go to welcome API. Let me go to welcome API. Okay, check it in the Eureka. Welcome API registered with Eureka. Now let's go to greet API. Let's go to Greet API. Check it. Greet API is also registered with Eureka. Yeah. Welcome API registered with Eureka, and Greet API is also registered with Eureka. Finally, API gateway. Run this API gateway. Running it as a boot application. Running this application as a Spring Boot application API gateway. It is failing. Cloud gateway predicates path we left. Property cloud gateway predicates path. It is not accepting that. Yeah, guys, I think the mistake is path is equal to, not colon. If a path is equal to /welcome, then it should get the value. Predicate path is equal to, not colon. I have given path colon. That was the mistake. Okay. Path, if path is equal to /welcome, it should go to welcome API. If a path is equal to greet, it should go to greet API. Earlier, what I have done, I have given path colon. That is wrong. We should give path is equal to. Path is equal to /welcome. So here, two routings I have configured. Route 1, route 2. So if the request is /welcome, if any request comes to API gateway with /welcome, it should go to welcome API. If any request comes with /greet, it should go to greet API. Chalo. Now let me run my API gateway also. Update this project. Maven, update this project. Force update. Perfect. Updated this Maven project. Yep. Eureka server is running. Admin server is running. Jipkin server is also running. Welcome API is running. Greet API is also running. Finally, let us run our API gateway. API gateway running on which port number? 3333. I'm giving the port number as 3333. Just for our understanding purpose, I have given 3333 port number of my API gateway. Okay. So now, can I say API gateway is also acting as a client for Eureka server? Can I say API gateway also acting as a client for Eureka server? One more exception I got. Unable to find route to predictor. One second. Unable to find route predicate factory with name path. There is another problem. There is another problem. Hyphen path is equal to /welcome. Path is equal to /greet. Yeah. Update the project. Maven. Update the project. Force update. All the services are running. Only API gateway is getting failed now. Yeah. Run as boot application. Yes. Finally, API gateway is also started successfully on the port number 3333. The spacing issue, guys. Spacing issue. Now, can you see API gateway is also registered with Eureka server? API gateway is also registered with Eureka server. Come on. Is API gateway also registered with Eureka server? Now, we are going to send the request to backend APIs, or we will send the request to API gateway. We will send the request to backend APIs directly, or we need to send the request to API gateway? Come on. API gateway. API gateway running on which port number? API gateway running on which port number? 3333. Chalo. 3333. Now let's go here. Actuator is not available there. Okay. Guys, भगवान को नमस्कार करेगा क्या? 3333 / नमस्कार किया. I'm going to send the request to API gateway. What is the URL pattern? What is the URL pattern? /welcome. Jai Shri Ram. Kam kiya. Welcome to Ashok IT. When I'm sending a request to my welcome API, I'm sending a request to API gateway. Guys, I'm sending a request to the welcome API. I'm sending the request to API gateway. How can you say that I'm sending a request to API gateway? How can we say that we are sending the request to API gateway? Port number. Now let me send the request to greet. When I send the request to greet, what happened? From request sent to API gateway. API gateway sent the request to greet. Greet is accessing welcome. Complete flow is executing now. Complete flow is executing now. I'm sending a request to API gateway. API gateway talking to routing. Routing is talking to service registry. From service registry, it is talking to greet API. From greet API, it is talking to FIAN client. FIAN client is talking to welcome API. Wow, our project is completed, guys. Awesome. Awesome. We are able to access our backend APIs indirectly by using API gateway. Now for the public users, I will give the URLs of my backend API. For public users, I will give only my API gateway. For public users, I will give my backend APIs, or for public users, I will give only API gateway. For public users, I'm going to give only my API gateway. समझे? समझे? Yes. So check the routings now. These are the routings I have configured. These are the routings I have configured. Cloud gateway routes. Route 1, route 2. Predicate path. If any request comes to API gateway with /welcome, it should forward the request to welcome API. If any request comes to the API gateway with /greet, it should go to greet API. The routing is working. Now what is pending in the API gateway? Filter concept is pending. That filter we can implement tomorrow. Filter only pending. That filter I can implement tomorrow. Okay, guys, just one filter I will write in the API gateway to tell you whether to process the request, whether not to process the request. I will discuss that in the tomorrow session. Filters. So if you want to understand this, you need to practice it, guys. Now I have given the diagram very clearly along with the port numbers also. Happy? Currently filters are not there in the API gateway. I have not created any filter in the API gateway now. In the tomorrow's class, I will create the filter. Once we complete the filter, then I will tell you load balancing also in the microservices. Okay, fine, perfect. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining today's long session on the Sunday. We completed the most important part in our course, microservices mini project. How to develop microservices mini project with service registry, admin server, Jipkin server, API gateway, FIAN client, routing, everything is done. One mini project is completed based on microservices architecture both theoretically and practically. Completely, I have developed this mini project in front of you. Live coding we have done, everything step by step. And I have prepared a notes also. If you just to follow these notes, anybody can develop this mini project. If you just to follow these notes, anybody can develop my mini project, whatever I have developed today. Let me update the notes in the website right now. Otherwise I will forget it, guys. Let me upload the notes. Okay. Let me delete this. Okay. Yeah. Upload new notes. I'm uploading 19 SBMS. Kaha? Yes. Microservices. Where is our microservices? 19 SBMS. Yeah, guys, check it. Now you got the notes. Guys, check it. You got the notes. Could you please confirm me? Is the latest notes uploaded in the portal? Is the latest notes uploaded in the portal? Are you able to download it? Yes, completely. The mini project notes is available. Now, guys, my sincere request, please practice this before coming to tomorrow's session. Sweet, who is that Sweet? You can access Welcome API directly also from the browser. It will also work. If you type this localhost colon, what is the port number of the Welcome API? Welcome API 8081, 8081/welcome. That will also will work. If the application is running successfully, I have stopped it. If the application is running successfully, that will also work for you. Okay, so the applications we can access from this API gateway, and directly also you can access it. So tomorrow I will tell you how to create the filters in the API gateway. Okay, good. In the real time, we will restrict the direct access for these backend APIs. So we don't give the URLs for the public. We will deploy them in the private network, so people cannot access our APIs directly in the real time. So people will be able to access only API gateway URL. Okay, guys. Yep. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining today's session. So today we learned very important topic. Notes also uploaded, diagram also shared. So please practice that before coming to tomorrow's session, so that you will understand more internals from tomorrow in the microservices. Thank you.